Aha!
Ooh.
Okay. Hello, everybody.
Is it happening? Oh, it's happening.
I think it's happening. Let me see if I can get it
Good.
so I can tweet out the link. And I need to do the other thing. Hold on, everybody.
Whoa.
Nobody panic. Everything's totally cool and chill. The freaking.
Oh, I see. Here we are.
Oh,
let me open this up.
We're here. A thing is happening. Okay.
I just pulled up the OSP After Dark stream to see
add
what's
videos.
happening.
Where is it? Oh no! What's happening? I need the live stream. Oh, there it is. Oh, thank goodness. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, alrighty. I've added it to the thingy. Let's see. Can anyone hear us? All right, chat. You know what to do if you can hear us. Banana. Let's get some bananas in the chat.
No, stop encouraging them to spam. Why does this always happen?
Yes, go, my children.
No.
Unleash the bananas. Oh no, hold on. Is my audio only coming through the left? Oh wait, I know how to fix this. Nobody panic. Everything's chill. Down mix to mono? That ought to do it, I hope, maybe, possibly.
Ew. Yes, mono is how you get it coming out of both speakers at the same time without doing any sort
All right, I'm seeing bananas. We are all good in the hood. Oh, and we already got $20. Sweet.
No, thanks.
Let me just copy this link and post it on the Twitters, as the kids do. Join us.
Indeed.
Fantastico. Wow, this is going remarkably smoothly.
They're sending all these bananas now.
All right.
I can't moderate that. What am I supposed to do with this?
Yes.
What do I do?
Yes, good.
No.
My power is maximum. Okay, let's just see.
Why does this have to be our thing?
All right. No. I've down mixed to mono. Let's see. Is chat... I hope your audio's coming through okay. It probably is. They're usually better with the Discord stoof. I think they'd let us know.
Who knows?
Who knows?
Stop. You guys, we understand it's good. Yes, you don't have to spam banana anymore.
All right, chat. If you're only getting me or Indigo through only one ear, I need you to put an onion in the chat to mix things up so I can see how this works. But if we're all good, put a potato in the chat.
Those two things look so incredibly similar. You could have picked apples and oranges. You could have picked any other two fruits and or vegetables that had different color schemes and or shapes, and you picked potato and onion.
I sure did. All right, I see a potato, but dang it, now I don't remember which one was which. Is onion bad and potato good? I think
onion was coming out of one side or the other, and potato was good. But I'm seeing a majority potato.
I'm seeing majority potatoes. I think anyone who's spamming onions might just need to check their
I saw one eggplant go flying by. See, it's moving so quickly that I can't
how to interpret that.
There's only one way to interpret it.
Oh, that's fair. Okay. Great. All right. I think we're good. Everything's chill and
why?
Good. Yes. Good.
No.
Go, my children. Unleash the spuds. Okay. So, allegedly, the reason we've all gathered here today is to discuss a topic that we've kind of been sitting on for a hot minute, because this was this won the Patreon poll like months ago. Which
we're on top of it.
Yeah, we're super. I mean, look, it's 2022. It was 2021. All right, stuff's been happening. We're allowed to be a little thrown. Okay, so the purpose of this stream. Oh, my poor computer fan is spinning up already. Guys, you gotta be easy on it. Take it easy on it. The purpose of this stream is to discuss various magic systems across assorted forms of media that we're all quite fond of. We've got a list over here. It's not the longest list in the world. This isn't like the himbo tier list where we had like pages and pages of beefy boys and you know, we barely had time in the day to go through all of them. This is going to be a little more probably quality over quantity. We're going to be discussing the specific magic systems in a little more depth, at least the ones that we know about. Some of these are on here because they're very well known, but neither of us happen to be particularly familiar with them. So we're going to be getting some strongly worded comments about them, I'm sure. Looking forward to it.
Yes.
Oh boy. Shall we start off with the one that everyone's expecting?
Yeah, I suppose we should start. I feel like, you know, we're doing a tier list. Maybe before we jump into any examples, what are we looking for in a magic system and how are we sorting this? You know, like Because there's a lot of different schools of thoughts on magic systems, and unlike himbos, I don't think there's one clear best version. So I guess the question is, what do you, Red, look for in a magic system that you might be influenced by when we're rating them from S to F tier?
Yeah, it's tricky. You know, from my perspective, a magic system ultimately exists to serve the story, and how it can do that is wildly variable depending on the story and the mechanics of the system in general. And because of that inherent flexibility, magic systems can play a lot of different narrative roles. You know, in a lot of them, it's just kind of adds flavor to the world or acts as kind of an inciting incident, triggers different events. In others, it strengthens certain characters. It incites specific kinds of villainy, adds all kinds of interesting stuff like that. In others, it just kind of exists to sort of permeate the world and make the whole thing feel sort of mystical and fantastical, which is just very fun. So ultimately, we're running into this issue where, like, almost none of these two magic systems are going to work particularly similarly, except in cases of clear, like, inspiration was taken, general ripping off perhaps occurred. So, you know, it's kind of an apples and oranges situation. Or potatoes and onions, chat. Get in there. Come on.
No. Why? Don't encourage them.
Anyway, so when we're ranking these magic systems, I think what we probably want to look at is not any specific trait of the magic system. We can't quite do like a himbo taxonomy thing like we did last time. We got to do kind of like, okay. So I'd say a good magic system is one that fits the world it's in, doesn't necessarily feel like it was kind of put on top of it, feels more like integrated with the setting, as it were, rather than sort of disrupting the internal rules. Let's see. I'd say one that isn't too prone to manipulation, doesn't cause deus ex machinas, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah, it needs to be somewhat internally consistent. Not in that it always does the exact same thing, but that everything that magic system is used to do feels like it could stem from whatever magic system has previously been described.
Yep.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. I'd say that we want the magic system to have an internal logic to it. Even in like a very soft magic system, we probably want it to, like, you know, hold together. We don't want it to be like, oh, this one thing is impossible, and then just kidding, it's fine actually, I'm the chosen one, so everything's
If the world has been sung into existence, and then all of a sudden someone whips out a gun and says it shoots spells, that's a problem. If the world has been sung into existence, and then someone creates magic rings, like, we're still on the same page.
Yeah,
you know?
That's the same flavor of magic, and that's really a lot of this. You know, like, some of the magic systems we're going to discuss today have a lot of different flavors of magic in them, but as long as that in turn kind of makes sense, we'll be okay. Like, when we get to Discworld, don't worry. We'll be fine. All right, so let's start off with the top of our list and make sure I can add this to the text. Oh, good, it's working.
Oh, yes, good job, Red. Type away.
Oh, wait, I'm going to need to change the font to something slightly less horrible.
No, I think starting out at the worst possible option and then going up from there.
We could do one that's completely incomprehensible that I made for the comic that's magic.
I feel like it's magic system. We gotta do like papyrus or something.
Oh, you're so right. Let me find it. Why are these Why aren't these in friggin'? These aren't in alphabetical order for some ungodly reason.
Does it have a search bar? Can you type in papyrus?
Hold on. I just don't understand why it's doing this.
Chat, I promise we'll get to Discworld.
It works. Dunzo.
And also,
all right, Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's sitting on top of the chair.
Yeah, we gotta talk about it.
Yes.
Avatar, how does the magic work? Well, there's the 4 elements, and people are benders. Benders can tap into said element, and through usually martial arts, do stuff with it.
Yeah.
That's the, like, shitty overhead view.
Yes, Avatar: The Last Airbender is a fairly hard magic system. There are specific people who can tap into these magical / beyond natural abilities, and there are people who can't. The only exception to the general rule of any one bender can only control one element is the Avatar, master of all 4 elements, which is a mystical reincarnated position that serves as the bridge between the human and the spirit worlds. By the way, this magic system also has a spirit world, which doesn't quite tie into the hard magic system of the elemental bending, but is connected. I'm not paying too much attention to Korra for personal reasons, but that's okay.
Yes.
Now, in Avatar: The Last Airbender, the first, the one with Aang, the magic system is pretty concrete. You've got what the first characters we meet, Sokka and Katara. Katara is a bender, Sokka is not a bender. So Sokka can't do any bending, he never gains the ability, he never learns how to. Katara can water bend, that's all she can do, and also she can heal, which is a component of water bending, which is fine. It's all good, don't worry about it. And this one is pretty solid. It's for the most part, it's very well structured. It is very much the pillar on which the story is based. I mean, the whole thing happens because of the bending system. Aang is the main character because he is the Avatar. Yeah, so it's well integrated. It doesn't internally break its own rules. Just about the only, I'd say, weakness of this magic system is that sometimes it is a little unclear why certain characters are struggling when they are having difficulty bending. Now, this is a component of a lot of magic systems. When you have your characters running around and they're like wizards, and they can tap into magic, one of the hardest parts is explaining what their limitations are, what they can and can't do. And it's very common in magic systems to kind of have it so that the characters are like magic batteries, and if they wear themselves out, they might hurt themselves or pass out dramatically. Very common. Avatar doesn't do that so much. They do it with Aang sometimes with the Avatar state. But for the most part, other benders don't so much overexert themselves. And it kind of feels like there's not really an upper limit on what a character can do. And the story kind of tells, but maybe doesn't show so much, that the hard limit on power is training. Because when we first meet Katara, she does a very impressive and large-scale act of bending with no training just because she's pissed off. So that kind of automatically tells us, like, no matter how much martial arts training they're going to do, that'll, like, hone the technique. But raw power-wise, that seems to be... that's something internal that they never really quite tap into. So
yeah, it's similar to... and they kind of expand on this in Korra a bit, and in the parts of Avatar where we do meet the creatures and or Moon, who are said to have given the bending abilities to
the lion turtles.
Moon. And they kind of like dip into like, here's why some people can bend, some people can't, but it's not really properly explained anywhere. I do think a strength of this system is that it is so physical in how you do the magic, quote unquote, the bending.
Right.
Tying it to martial arts is, for an animated show, is a brilliant way to make the combat and movement seen on screen. If this was a written magic system, I don't think it would be nearly as interesting to the universe it exists in. Or if this was a book as opposed to a TV show the first time around, I don't think it would be as applicable. I cannot speak English today. This is a problem.
Even as a comic, magic system, I don't think it would work as well, because so much of what makes it work is the fluidity of movement, and like each bending system is in large part drawn on a real world martial art. The one I noticed most immediately is that waterbending has a lot of the movements of Tai Chi in it, which is a very soft martial art. I believe there's more like karate in earthbending, which has a lot of hard stances and stuff like that. And airbending is based on things like, more like dance. Firebending's got some capoeira in there. And anyway, so it's a very, very good magic system specifically for the medium that the story is in. And I read some of the sequel comics to Avatar, and, they're fine. But it does not have the same impact that the fluidity of movement that animation can give you. So, yeah. So in terms of integrating into the medium, top notch. Like the bending system in Avatar is great. Part of the reason why the movie is so bad is because it's almost impossible to translate something this fluid into, live action, because so much of it involves manipulating the very physical world around the characters, and the physical world needs to be manipulated with CGI, and then you need to keep CGIing whatever changes you made into the scene. It's just a huge pain in the butt. Whereas if you're animating, you can just draw different scenery, and it's no harder than anything else.
Yeah, I think overall, bending as a magic system is pretty solid. It's a pretty clear, hard magic system with relatively clear rules. And only every once in a while do they really stretch the bounds of that, which is, I think, what might keep it from being S tier, but put it in the A tier for me, where it's, it's solid. Overall, no immediate issues, but there is some ambiguity as to like magical sourcing, and I know we're talking about The Last Airbender and not Korra, but in Korra we sort of get a bit more wibbly with like who can do what and the expansions on powers and what have you. So I think this is very close to being like a perfect magic system, and it works extremely well for the universe that it's in, but I don't know if it's S tier for me.
I'd say that's accurate. I think it's a very solid magic system, and its main struggle is just, the way that they kind of integrated in with the characters and the characters' particular power levels in any given scene. Like, you know,
Yeah.
by the end of the show, like, Katara is a friggin' powerhouse, which is incredible. It's really fun. But, like, it's almost unclear why characters have particular difficulty early on. Like, Zuko is pretty much the exception, because Zuko's struggling with firebending is so integral to his character that they really do a great job exploring it. And because so much of firebending is coming from emotional stability, and Zuko has none of that for 2.5 seasons, it kind of explains everything. But then, like, I thought this was interesting when I was doing my recent rewatch. Like, he never gets any sort of power up. He doesn't even get appreciably better at firebending. He never figures out how to actually do lightning bending. He doesn't, you know, even hanging out with the dragons and seeing the cool multicolored fire just kind of puts him back to the level he was before he got nerfed. It's just so on brand that Zuko never actually gets a power up or particularly more badass than he was when he started out. Anyway, I think we can pretty solidly put this one in the A tier. It's really good. Yeah. It's not 100% flawless, but it's really good.
Yeah, it's a good example of a hard magic system, and with a few exceptions that we could get nitpicky about, it does what it sets out to do incredibly well, especially in the medium that it's in.
Yes. All right, let's see what we got next on the list. Oh, yeah, that's a pretty good one. All right, let's see. How exactly...
Who's next?
Oh, you know.
Oh, yes.
You know.
Okay.
Oh, you know.
So next up on the list, while Red goes about typing in things, is Full Metal Alchemist. I suppose we put it Brotherhood on here. I originally read the manga and then later went on to watch the anime, but they're both kind of the exact same system, more or less.
Yes. Ah, dang it. It did the thing I didn't want it to do again. We're good.
No.
I just need to make another one. Everything's totally chill and fine and cool. All right, you get one in a funny font, and then after that, we're doing everything normal. All right.
Avatar. Not Avatar.
Oh, so close.
Full Metal.
Full Metal Alchemist. Specifically the one in Brotherhood. I didn't watch much of the 2003 one, and I didn't like it very much, so we're not tapping into that.
Humankind cannot gain anything without first giving something in return. To obtain something of equal value must be lost. That is alchemy's first law of equivalent exchange.
All right, let's not get too crazy here. Clearly, we're both nerds. So, the magic system in Full Metal Alchemist is very much a hard magic system. It initially looks like maybe it's not, and then it turns out it totally is. Everything works on equivalent exchange. Yes, everything. And the initial question of what could equal the value of a human soul gets answered. Other human souls, lots of alchemical power, good stuff.
An arm and a leg.
That too, yes. So, for those of you who haven't watched it, you should. The magic system in Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood is alchemy. Not fully accurate to the real-world study of alchemy, which was basically just glorified chemistry with some weird stuff in it.
It draws on the flavor of real-world alchemy and the mentions of the sorcerer philosopher's stone.
The imagery, the flag of Amestris has the green lion symbol on it, all that good stuff. Anyway. But the principle that it all works on is equivalent exchange. The idea that you can basically you can turn anything into anything else as long as it's, you know, the same amount of it, the same matter, you know, to obtain something of equal value must be lost, basically. So you know, you can take stone and you can reshape it into a big punchy fist, which is main character's special move, or you can you know, turn a metal into a different metal, but you're not supposed to because it destabilizes the local economy. And you can't make something out of nothing. And when it looks like people are breaking the rules of alchemy, it turns out that they are instead using philosopher's stones to draw the energy and matter needed for this transmutation from elsewhere. So essentially, matter is still not being created out of nothing, it's being created out of something else. And spoiler alert, that something else is made from a whole bunch of human souls mashed together, and it's no bueno. So this is probably one of the hardest magic systems I've ever seen, in the sense that it follows its own rules almost 24/7. One of the reasons I had trouble with the 2003 version is that it kind of stops doing that after a while. Just kind of start making shit up, but that's fine.
That's I feel like a symptom of the 2003 version, as is often the case for a lot of anime that starts before a series ends and then eclipses it.
That's really it.
Suddenly the main thrust of the story, which I would argue in the case of Full Metal Alchemist, is exploring the implications of this magic system.
Yeah, that's really it.
Lost.
This is one of those stories where the magic system doesn't exist to serve the plot. The plot exists to explore the magic system, which is just, wow, so good. For me, I think this is an easy S tier. Might just be because I'm also rewatching it, like, as we speak, and it's just so good. It's still so good. It gets better every time. So that's, I can...
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with you on that one. I think that this is a great example of a hard magic system that is working with the story in a way that is always internally consistent. One of the things that I think is most impressive about this series is that the magic, quote unquote, always follows the rules that are set for it, and they don't fall into the trap that I think some of the later Avatar stuff sometimes does, where it's like, what if we bent the rules a little bit? It's like, no, here are the rules we've established.
Only the Avatar, the rule bender. Anyway.
Yeah, no, the story, of course, always follows the rules that it's set, and we get an exploration of those rules and kind of an understanding of why they exist through the main thrust of the story. And I think that the tie between narrative and the hardness of the hard magic system.
Yeah, it's an awkward phrasing, but that's accurate. Yeah. No, definitely. I also think that, like, I've gone on record saying that I think Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood is one of the best shows I've ever seen. Just overall.
Oh, yeah.
And, like,
there's a reason it's a great place to start your friends out if you want to get them into anime.
Absolutely, yeah. And, like, the way the whole plot comes together, like, some stories you can kind of tell the author's kind of making it up as they go. Not this one. This one was clearly, like, plotted out from minute one. If you watch it, like, the first time you watch it, you're like, that's so cool. And the second time you watch it, pretty much every, like, 10 minutes, there's something that makes you point at the screen and go, oh, you motherfucker! Because they're like, oh, there's a bit in the first episode where the bad guy says, you don't understand the shape this country's in. And it's like, oh, buddy, you have no idea. This is so... Anyway, I think this is an easy S. I think we're not going to get any arguments from either of us about this one. This is just, it's top quality. It's really good. It's integrated into the plot incredibly well. Just so fun. So yeah, I'll just scooch this one up there.
Just scooch that one up in there to that S tier. Give it its spot.
Yeah.
Give it its place at the top of the tier list.
We got a fun one up next. Let me just add this additional text box. You know how I do. And while I do, let me just... Okay, come on. Everything's cool. This is going to be a fun one.
Everyone who's in the chat asking who is in stream right now, it's Red. Red, say hi.
Yo-ho, it's me.
And hi, I'm Indigo. I produce the podcast. If you don't listen to the podcast, you probably don't know who I am, and that's okay.
But
you and Cyan are probably, I don't know, eating dinner or something. They're responsible adults.
Actually, I think they might be watching the stream. Cyan texted me earlier like, yeah, you're good. Delayed response. Anyway, so...
nice.
By the way, and if you haven't listened to the podcast, you should listen to today's episode.
Absolutely.
It's very unhinged. We talk about fish
one of the
a
most
lot.
unhinged ones we've ever recorded.
Yes.
I don't know why it happened, but it makes a lot of sense that it did. So this next system...
This next question comes from
Lord
of the Rings.
If we can call it that.
Yes, Lord of the Rings, the softest of soft magic systems.
Oh boy.
Tolkien was inspired for the most part by Norse mythology and folklore, a system which doesn't have a magic system. It's folklore. That's how it works. Magic just kind of happens. And we just passed 1,000 raised for UNICEF.
Hey,
thank you so much
guys.
To John Michael Chance, who donated that $100 that took us over the edge. Very nice.
Nice.
All right. Anyway, so yes, Lord of the Rings, soft magic system. This is one of those ones that I think kind of bugs a modern audience more than it would have at the time, because Tolkien kind of pioneered the concept of fantasy as a thing that grown-ups might like. Like, he and C.S. Lewis were both very much on board with this. They were like, it's silly that people think that fantasy and magic is for children only. I mean, these men lived through 2 world wars. They're allowed to want a little whimsy in their lives. And they were both kind of writing from a similar motivation, even if the way they executed it was wildly distinct. The magic system, for want of a better word, of Lord of the Rings is, stuff can happen if it's cool enough.
It's a very soft magic system, but it's almost more, I would describe it as an epic magic system. It's like things happen in a very mythological way where like this magic is ancient and old and is never really fully explained, but it's kind of better that we never really fully explain it because knowing its limitations would not aid the story.
Yeah. So it's like, especially if you go from The Hobbit to Lord of the Rings, like, Gandalf in The Hobbit, he's just a goofy old man, and then he leaves in the middle of a chapter. He's like, I gotta go, have fun. And then, like, the movies had to be like, he's all fighting Sauron and flirting with Galadriel. And it's like, no, he's not. He's probably getting high in the forest with Radagast the Brown. Anyway, like, the most impressive thing he does in The Hobbit is hide in a tree and chuck flaming pine cones at some bad guys. And it's like, okay, you know what, that's fine.
Which mood?
Yeah, I mean, we could all be so lucky. Yeah. Who among us wouldn't do that on a Friday night? But then, in Lord of the Rings, basically the most visually impressive thing Gandalf does is fighting that Balrog. It's pretty cool, all things considered. And then he dies, and then he comes back. And if you only read Lord of the Rings and not the Silmarillion, you might not be aware that this is because Gandalf's just a straight-up angel, baby. Just literally actually an angel. And so is the Balrog, but we don't talk about that. Anyway, in terms of magic systems, Lord of the Rings is not high on my personal list. It's a lot of fun, and I like how the entire world feels intensely magical, but Tolkien is drawing on this idea that the magic is sort of ebbing away. Like, the old world had so much magic in it. You had, like, big kingdoms that sunk under the ocean and other things in the Silmarillion, which I haven't read in years. So, there's a lot of stuff there, but it's kind of ending. The elves are either going to kind of stop being what they are, or they're going to have to leave for the magical elf underworld and stuff like that. Or otherworld, sorry, underworld implies bad. So, like, it's fine, and there's parts of it I really like. But as far as magic systems go, the magic system in Lord of the Rings is probably one of the most consistent sources of frustration I've found people have with the story. Like, everything else they're cool with, but when it comes to, like, well, why couldn't Gandalf just, then suddenly it's just like, sparks flying, rage.
The Lord of the Rings magic system is not really all that integral to the story of the Lord of the Rings, other than it is probably what allowed for the creation of the Rings of Power. Like, beyond that, it just sort of happens to be that some characters can use magic. There are some magical things that are referenced. It's not necessarily integral to the story in the way that, like, alchemy is in Fullmetal Alchemist or bending is in Avatar. And for me, this means that the magic system ranks lower. I have nothing against a soft magic system.
Yeah.
They have their place. I just think that it's not serving the story in a way that makes it an exceptional example of a magic system. Especially because if you ask someone, hey, what's the magic system in Lord of the Rings? They're going to just start naming examples of magic in Lord of the Rings rather than giving you a system. And I think that shows a weakness of a system.
I'd say that's accurate. Yeah, I'm willing to put this in, like, C, just because, like, it was a absolute landmark story. I think Lord of the Rings as a story is top tier, but the magic system part, it's like, there has to be magic because it's a magical fantasy world, but at any point where the magic has the option of fixing anything, it can't happen because then the plot doesn't work. So, and, like, the corruptive power of the ring is probably the part of the magic system that it gets focused on the most, but, like, that's just there's a little bit of Sauron in it. Sauron's got serious bad vibes. So, like, does that count as a magic system if it's like we put a bad thing in a small object and now the small object does bad things?
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't know how much Lord of the Rings counts as a magic system so much as it is a world that has magical elements in it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's fair. All right,
I would almost put this down at, like, D tier, frankly, because it's barely a system.
Let's put it on the line,
I love the Lord of the Rings.
Go shit in, because we do love Lord of the Rings here. But we gotta be honest. We gotta be true to our hearts. Oops. Okay, we're good. All right. Next bold on the list. Oh, this is gonna be a fun one. We might get some strongly worded comments about where we put this in relation to the last one. Oh, boy. Okay, here we go. Good, yes. Excellent. Alrighty. Let's talk about the Force, baby. So, as far as magic systems go, the Force is not as soft as some. No. It's a little bit woofty, surrounds us, binds us, it's an energy. Maybe it's also a bacteria or something, whatever the fuck a midichlorian is, whatever. But in terms of what you can do with the Force, things get a little bit shaky, but there's there's kind of a space of things that we understand are abilities that you can use the Force for. And as long as there are things within that space, it doesn't feel too crazy. So, like, The Jedi, you know, if we just start with the original trilogy, it's like, okay, what can the Force do? It kind of gives you like feelings about your friends, you know, like you might be half the galaxy away, but like you feel that they're in danger, so you can run off to help them.
In the Force,
and then you're dangling over a big hole to space, and you reach out and contact your twin sister. Okay, that's stuff you can do with the Force, and like you can levitate stuff with your mind. Okay, cool. So like the Force gives you telekinesis and psychic powers. Fine, whatever, that's cool. And then I don't think we see Force lightning until the third of the original trilogy. Like, the Emperor busts it out, and it's like, oh, hot damn, I didn't know it could do that. I think that's accurate, because I don't think we really see the Emperor do anything before that. He's just on a lot of, like, video calls, Skyping in to give commands to Lord Vader.
Yeah, he jumps on the Zoom call. They hash out their strategy for the week before they jump off the morning meeting and go to, I don't know, conquer a planet or something, whatever the bad guys are doing.
You know, I feel like if the pandemic had happened like 10 years earlier, we would have seen so many little college humor sketches about like the hollow calls from Star Wars having like Zoom connection problems.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so the thing is, initially, the Force is pretty solid. It's like, okay, it's a standard issue magic system, gives you psychokinesis, telekinesis, you're a little bit psychic. And maybe it gives you access to dark power if you tap into it, but you shouldn't, because it'll make you ugly and bad stuff will happen. Which is very standard, like, generic fantasy stuff. And, you know, we got to remember, early Star Wars is just a classic sword and sorcery fantasy story reskinned for space. So it makes perfect sense that the magic system would be exactly the same. You can do fancy stuff with it. You can move stuff with your mind. Oh, right, and the mind trick thing. That's another thing they established very early on. So it's like, okay, you can mess with people's minds. You can do stuff with your own mind. You can levitate stuff. Great. And if you're evil, you can shoot lightning out of your fingers or something. Cool, fine. And then the prequels gave us way more Jedi and kind of talked about the Force more. So, you know, it's like you still got the standard issue stuff, but they also tapped into the stuff about, like, what the dark side does to you. And how it's like, if you're emotionally stable, you use the light side. But if you're a jerk, you use the dark side. And I don't know, stuff like that. And then, well, you know, we did get the sequels. And they did some stuff, too. I think the problem with the Force as a magic system is similar to a lot of magic systems. Either it does a lot of incredibly cool stuff that maybe the effects budget can't handle, or it's nowhere near as useful as it really should be. So the Genndy Tartakovsky 2D animated Clone Wars has the Force at its most powerful seeming. There's a whole episode that's just Mace Windu fighting an entire army of bots single-handedly, and there's bits where, like, he uses the Force to pop all of the bolts out of one of them, and it just falls into pieces, and it's like, why don't all the Jedi do that all the time? And the answer is no budget.
The Force definitely suffers from visual effects, but I think something that hurts it more is just the way that the series has evolved over time. Like, if you look at the original trilogy, I feel like that's one variant of the Force, and then prequels start getting into more of a sci-fi variant of it and making it almost more of a hard magic system, although it's never quite fleshed out to the point where it qualifies as one. And then we get the fast forward to the new trilogy, and it's like, how do we want to use this to do all sorts of mind melding, inception-y stuff? And I'm like, the Force kind of suffers from never really being sure what the Force wants to be, because every single time it appears, whoever is in charge of the series uses it in a different manner. And that hurts it as a magic system for me, because if your magic system is flexible enough to never quite be identifiable, even if we know it is called the Force and you use the Force, Luke, and whatever, like, it doesn't mean that system is great. I think this is probably sitting at a C, maybe a B tier for me, but it was like a hard maybe.
I think it would easily go in C tier for me. Just it's a good point that, like, every writer uses the Force for different purposes. And, like, again, thinking back to, like, the first couple movies, you know, the most iconic things that the Force is used for is the mind trick and the switch off your targeting computer and use the Force thing. And it's like, neither of those are really abilities that are within the scope of just the general vibe the Force has in the later movies, or, you know, prequel-wise, you know, timeline-wise, the earlier movies.
If you understand the Force as it kind of does in the earlier movies, where it's like, it's sort of just like the threads uniting the universe, like in a different series it'd be called The Weave or whatever. Like,
we'll get there.
We'll get there. Yeah. That, I think, fits the vibe of the original trilogy, but then you get into all the subsequent trilogies and sequel series and what have you, and it just becomes muddier. And that muddiness kind of knocks the system overall. Even if it starts out decent. It's just over time this has suffered so dramatically
and
from.
Then I'm remembering like the animated Clone Wars series is mostly good, but then there's that weird episode or like sub arc where they go to that planet, and it's like maybe the planet is the Force, and the people on it might be the Force, and it's like, the fuck is happening? And the way they explain that away is, don't worry, nobody remembers it. And it's like, oh god, I wish that were me.
Like 8 different origins for the Force, and it changes every other episode and or movie, and that's just not the good makings for a magic system. You have to be internally consistent, even if you're not a hard system. And the Force is not even internally consistent, even a little bit.
Yeah, I'd say that like perhaps if we like really focused in and we picked a specific sub part of Star Wars and we were like, just the Force in this part, there's internal consistency and it works. But Star Wars has changed hands so many times. This is even touching on the expanded universe, the comics, that stuff with Anakin being a child of the Force or some shit. Whatever. Like, the problem is if we look at the big picture, and we kind of have to, it just doesn't hold together. So like I'd put this like low C, possibly also, line between C and D if we really wanted to.
Yeah, I'd agree. All right, I think that it's down there. I love Star Wars, but the Force has never made sense. It won't stop me from pretending I'm using it every time I walk through an automatic door, but that does not mean I understand the mechanics behind how the Force is implemented in its world.
Everyone does that. It's completely natural.
Red, I'm being #relatable.
Yeah. Get that sweet content.
Remember to like and subscribe.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
You know that thing where you walk through an automatic door and you're like, these aren't the droids you're looking for? Remember to like, comment, subscribe, ring that bell.
Oh my
subscribe
god.
to our Patreon.
It's not even late. It's not even dark yet. We're already in the after dark zone.
Yeah, I should have known.
Hello, Daniel.
Don't stop.
Daniel Green's in the chat.
Willy Wonka. Oh, that's a
Is that a magic system, or is he just a serial killer? There's a discussion to be had there, but I'm not sure if it's appropriate for this tier list.
All right, for now, let's do one that there will be some fun opinions on. The new She-Ra.
Woo!
This one's fun.
Did you ever watch the original the OG She-Ra cartoon? Because I've seen some episodes of it, and I don't know. This is unrelated to the magic system. I'm just curious if you've seen them.
I've seen clips. Well, I've seen one clip, and that clip is the one where She-Ra rides up on the Pegasus and goes, "Care for a game of tag, Catra?" And then Catra just like yells, and I'm like, "Wow, the '80s sure were a thing that happened." Anyway, so the new She-Ra has a very fun magic system because it initially looks like it's a soft magic system, power, friendship, hot nonsense thing, and then it turns out it's not, and I love it. I love it so much. So for those of you who haven't seen, in the season 1 finale, all the princesses who've been kind of fighting each other and like failing to come together all team up, and then they all glow rainbow colors and they defeat the bad guys with a magical wave of rainbow energy. And my brain was like, oh yeah, this is a magical girl show. That just kind of happens sometimes.
Power friendship, baby.
Yeah, exactly. Perfectly normal. And then of course, as the show goes on, it is revealed that that is not how the magic system works. It's actually a fairly hard magic system. The planet of Etheria is oozing with wild magic, which is just like, regular, like it's uncontrolled, it's wild and free. But the people who came there first, the first ones, they like magiteched the planet up, and they made these big crystals to channel the magic into exciting different ways, and then people could connect to those in ways that aren't really explained in the show, but it seems like it makes sense, so it's okay. And each of those princesses connected to a crystal is tapping into the magic of the planet in one specific way. And when you put all the princesses together, the planet turns into a really big gun. And I just love the fact that, like, the power of friendship, magical gay rainbow wave at the end of season 1 was, like, the first bit of foreshadowing for the overarching plot of, oh no, our planet is the Death Star, actually. So, yeah. Yeah, I think it's a pretty solid magic system. Like in the actual execution of what magic can do, a little bit more soft. Each princess has a fairly limited power set, so like Glimmer can teleport and shoot little blasts of glitter, and Frosta can like make ice to a frankly ridiculous degree.
And I think that kind of ties into a strength of the system in that you pretty much understand the capabilities of each of the individual users of it and how much they can use the system.
Yep.
Like they each have to all the princesses, of course, have to recharge the various home bases
Actually,
to
I
tap
think
into the magic.
only Glimmer needs to recharge.
Is it only Glimmer?
And it's only while Angela is also attached to the Moonstone. After that, she stops needing to recharge.
Okay, so scratch that. In that case, it's still very clear, though, what each character can do with their magic. They don't cross-use any different types of magic, with the exception of the, like, Mages Guild, essentially, which is sort of tied in with Shadow Weaver, and Glimmer starts to dip into it later on.
Yeah, I forgot
and that's
they
where
also
the
just have
hardness
sorcery.
of the magic system starts to get a little bit smudged, which is coming from a bit of the He-Man tie-in and all that.
Yeah. Actually, you know what? I think that makes sense because they've established that, like, essentially the planet had a soft magic system and then they used Magitech to construct a hard magic system from it. So both magic systems are still present. I actually really like that. You know what? I like that more now that I've thought about it. So we've got simultaneously the hard magic system of there are princesses, they have runestones, the runestones give them magic powers, and also they are all parts of a really big space gun. And then there's the soft magic system, which kind of gets explored more in the later seasons. Spoiler alert, I guess. I mean, you know, come on. You guys knew there were going to be spoilers coming into this.
Spoiler alert for everything we discuss for the rest of the stream.
But basically, there's... All right, for context, Blue's been watching She-Ra, and he's been having a good time, but he does describe Adora as thinking at about 2 miles an hour at one point, which was just, oh, baby, it was so on point. And when you're watching the later seasons, especially season 5, there's, spoiler alert, in the climax of season 4, Adora breaks the sword and loses her ability to transform into She-Ra, except, no, she doesn't. No, she doesn't. Obviously, she doesn't. At every turn, she's told by everybody who knows everything, She-Ra's not the sword. She-Ra's in you. And she's like, oh, but if only I had the sword, I'd be able to be She-Ra again. And poor, like, whatever her name is, Madam, you know, the kooky old lady with the glasses, the one who knows everything about everything and just keeps giving exposition and turning up sometimes. She's the one who's like, no, She-Ra's not a sword. She-Ra's you. And then Adora spends another 3 episodes before she finally has her magical gay awakening and becomes She-Ra again. Anyway,
yes, of course.
That last season kind of turns She-Ra into more of a soft magic system thing where it's like, what can She-Ra do? Whatever looks good on the storyboard. She can make little platforms on space to run along because it'll look really good, and she can, you know, blast sword beams, like really big sword beams. Whee! And it's I find it hard to be upset about that because they've kind of earned it by clearly delineating the difference between the hard magic system and the soft magic system. And at that point, it's like, well, the sword broke, so now Adora's ability to transform into She-Ra is not being filtered through the first one's tech that made the whole world like this. So now she can just kind of do it, which is cool. And I think just the level to which the world building of this is integrated into the plot, and similar to the way they do it in Full Metal Alchemist, is like, this is really, the plot is about figuring out how this magic system works and untangling it. And I just think that's really cool. I'm inclined to rank this pretty high. Maybe not as high as some. I think that it's a softer magic system than some, and that also means, like, well, what can and can't these guys do? You know, whatever.
Yeah, I think sometimes there is a little bit of a lack of clarity for just what the scope of the one or both of the systems is at any given point in the series, which knocks it down from being S or A tier for me, but I would still put it as a solid B tier system. I think there's a lot of interesting, like, plot tie-ins, and the way it integrates with the world is really fluid, but it's just got a couple things where I'm like, I really don't know where you're getting that from, but I guess that's magic, so it works.
Yeah. And then it's like, you know, there's also princesses running around that don't have runestones. Like, Entrapta doesn't have a runestone. She's just kind of there. She's there because she's the only person who stands a chance of figuring out how the planet works. Anyway, yeah, I think we're in pretty solid agreement. We're going to put this one in the B tier. It's quite baby. Solid. Again, like, the judgment of where we're putting these in the tier list is not a judgment of, you know, the stories they're part of. It's how the magic system integrates into it.
Yes.
All right, what's up next? Oh, goody. This one won't be spicy at all. Huzzah. Okay.
I don't know which one of the two you're going to yet.
We have a list that we're going down in order, and I'm going with the bolded ones. Yeah, no. Yeah, you know the one.
As a caveat, before we get into this one, everyone here at OSP stands with all of our transgender friends and the transgender community at large.
Trans rights are human rights. And if you're expecting us to be like, look, I don't agree with her politics, but, like, the story's good, that's not what's about to happen.
No, not even a little bit.
Yeah, so
we're going to talk about Harry Potter's magic system.
Yeah, we are. Now, the magic system in Harry Potter is soft, shall we say?
It's a soft magic system parading around like it's a hard magic system.
Yeah, it's one of many things in the greater Harry Potter universe that was not thought through beyond the bare minimum that applies to the story.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's like most of the world building, it exists so that it can be introduced to Harry, used for only its intended purpose, and then forgotten about. Much like house elves and teleportation and, all the other cool stuff they introduced, time turners, all that super cash stuff. It's a very by the seat of your pants style of writing, as a lot of people have been pointing out. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Please. I was going to say, it's what defines the magic system in this series for me is that it is almost all effects and never any cause. I feel like throughout 7 books, what you learn is, here's all the different things that magic can totally do, but never once do we really get an explanation of why that is possible.
Yeah.
And that is, to me, a fundamental weakness of the system, because I don't need you to tell me explicitly how every single thing happens and occurs, but not even referencing, like, here's the source of magic, here's where it comes from, or, magic is just an inherited thing, and here's why some people can do it and some people can't. It just sort of is.
Yep.
And I don't think that makes for a strong system. I think that just makes for the ability to pull effects when you need them. Like, the time turner, for example, which just sort of shows up at the end of book 3, and it's like, this has totally been a thing that we've always been able to do. Don't worry about it. Or like,
if anyone
the magic ex machina.
If anyone's watched the Sean video that recently came out about this, he brings up a concept of like, there's like a 1-book delay before the writer, like, basically explained away a plot hole that was introduced in a previous book, because by that point the audience had been like, hey, if they have time turners, why can't they just do this? And it's like, oh, because they were all destroyed, all of them. Neville tripped and fell and broke all of them forever. That's why.
Yep.
So yeah, the problem is the Harry Potter magic system is wafer thin. Like most of the world building, the minute you start thinking about it, it just stops making sense. A few people have pointed out, like, how is anybody in this universe poor when there is magic for repairing things forever and just making stuff from nothing and summoning things? And the answer is, well, the Weasleys are poor because J.K. Rowling had a very specific aesthetic in mind for that family, and she didn't care about how little it made sense in the universe she'd created. Like, the consistency within it is non-existent, because the point was never the consistency, it was the aesthetic. She was creating an aesthetic she was very familiar with, of a specific slice of British culture, and then she made a magic system, theoretically, in it, and then had to keep explaining why it didn't break everything. And it just didn't work. It didn't work because she didn't think it through, because that wasn't the point. Like you said, it was a lot of like effects and no cause. And, nobody ever explains how the spells come up. Nobody ever, like, there's a whole plot point in the 6th book of like, oh, when Snape was a student, he was coming up with spells on his own. And it's like, how?
Did he just throw more Latin words together?
Yeah.
Like, there's never, you're out of school for nearly 7 years, and not once does anyone say, magic is from putting these words together, or magic is from tapping into this source, or anything along those lines at all. It's just like, here are effects that we can produce, and we will produce these effects when they are relevant to the plot, and never outside of that.
Yep.
And I think that makes for a very weak and, like you said, paper thin magic system.
Yeah. The closest thing you get to solid parts of the magic system are, well, completely disconnected. There's that thing about like wand cores, and oh, these wands have the same core, so something. There's the magical power of love that they use to explain why Voldemort can't mess with Harry until he can, because of whatever. There's house elf magic, which is completely unrelated to wizard magic, and they can just keep doing it, which is, whatever. There's the Deathly Hallows, which are things that they just got from literal actual death, who's a thing now, I guess. But they don't meet him the one time Harry dies, which is an interesting choice. Whatever. That's the thing. Like, it's just... The world building in Harry Potter is non-existent because the point of this was never actually to world build. There was never an attempt to make a consistent through line that tied the whole story together. It's just, putting one thing after the other and then providing the barest possible reason for why they actually always made sense and it was always fine. You know, if there's one thing we've learned from how she conducts herself nowadays and how she's been conducting herself on Twitter for years, this is not a person who ever admits ever having not thought something through or been wrong or been anything less than perfect. And it's always been, oh no, that was actually fine the whole time because of this thing that I didn't just make up, because that would be silly. So it's just like, all the other problems aside, as a magic system, this is just barely a thing. Like,
right.
Remember when the clever solution that Harry came up with was using his magic to summon his magical broomstick and then fly away on it? I remember. I thought it was the coolest thing ever when I was 10, because it was pretty cool. But it's like, nobody in the history of this game has ever done that before. Really?
Yeah, I think this is an E or F tier system for me, because it's barely a system. It's like I mentioned earlier, it's all effect, no cause. And if you can't identify a cause, you can't identify a system. And we are here to rank magic systems.
Yeah. I will also freely admit to being biased on this. It's very hard for me to have any sort of positive feelings towards this these days. Like, there was a time when I had residual goodwill for this franchise, but at this point, like, I've got the most jaded perspective on this. And it's just like, there was a lot that was fun about it, but like, through the slightest criticism, it just doesn't hold up. It doesn't hold up because the point of it was never to hold up. It was to tell a fun, good-natured boys' adventure story in classic 80s Thatcher Britain or whatever the hell. And when you look at that from a world-building perspective, there is none, because the point was to recreate an aesthetic she was already familiar with, and that meant she wasn't interested in creating a world beyond the real one. So the magic system isn't good. I mean, it's a little bit telling that, like, they teach Harry about 3 spells and then he never learns more spells. It's like, oh, there's potions. How do potions work? I'll never tell. We don't like Snape. That's all you need to know.
You're at school, the one place where you should learn how magic works.
Yeah, there's magical botany. How do the magic plants work? Oh, I'll never tell. Harry's bored. He's a dumb jock. He gets Hermione to do all his homework, which conveniently means I never need to explain what he's learning. And he never needs to improve beyond his first spell, Expelliarmus. So, yeah, I think in terms of magic system-wise, I'm willing to put this down at, like, just straight up F. Think no more about it.
Yeah. As was stated at the top, you know, trans rights are human rights.
Trans rights are human rights.
All of our trans friends out there, fuck derps, and we're gonna stick this one in the F tier.
And also, all that racism and anti-Semitism is pretty shitty, and I don't like how she keeps trying to double down to make it seem like she never messed up. Like I said, her pattern is just never admitting ever having been less than perfect, which means she has to double down. All right, after one that I had a lot to say about, this is fun. This is one I have nothing to say about. Give me just a second to get the text in.
Yeah, while you're doing that, the next one we're going to be talking about is The Witcher. Now, for context, I think I am the one who knows the most about this series. I played a little bit of The Witcher 3, but most of this is coming from having watched the TV show and then quickly reading a wiki article about how magic in The Witcher series works.
Yay!
So, we're going to try and power through it. It's kind of similar to a lot of systems that are like us drawing from a source of magic. Magic in The Witcher is all about harnessing the power of chaos, which is sort of like not disorder and confusion. It's its own mystical energy. It's in opposition to order, so it's more confrontational and aggressive. But it's also the source of magic for the sages and what have you in The Witcher. I think it's implied that everyone can use magic to some degree, but you have to train to harness it, which is what like Yennefer has done. And there's certain individuals who are just innately able to harness it more, and they're known as sources, which is sort of like the Ciri school of thought. And if you don't learn to control your intense power, you know, you go crazy or whatever. Bad effects. Witchers also use a form of magic. They use signs, which I think I do remember actually from the game, because that's how you get your like push away fireball. Which is sort of like a pared down version of the magic system that's a bit more hand and combat based and lets you do very specific things. So I have difficulty saying exactly how hard this magic system is. It's sort of like, it is very clear about where it is coming from. I think what it can do is a bit more ambiguous. There's certainly like things it's expected to, drawing on the 4 elements and what have you. But because it is a sword and sorcery show, sometimes the magic is able to be harnessed in a way that is not necessarily explicitly made clear by the lore of the game or show or books. I have not read any of the books, so if you explain there, I apologize.
I have watched 3 episodes of the show total. I've never played the games, never read the books. so I have no context for this, although I will say the magic being drawn from a sort of primordial chaos that exists in contrast with order, that's a very common sort of magic system flavoring. I don't know if it was originated by Michael Moorcock, but he used it a lot. And Warhammer fully ripped it off from him, up to and including the symbol of chaos being the sort of 8-pointed spoked wheel thingy. So it wouldn't surprise me if Witcher was drawing on that. It's a very classic bit of like just fun fantasy stuff. So yeah, having seen some of The Witcher, like they don't tend to throw around magic too much. It does seem like they're kind of trying to go for sort of the gritty dark tone that you can't really get so much in a universe where a wizard fixed it is just a thing.
So I feel like the strength of The Witcher is that the magic system is kind of exactly what you expect from swords and sorcery. Like there's never an effect that is completely antithetical to the type of story they're telling, but I do think that also makes it a very average magic system. But the show is not, and the book and the games are not necessarily inherently about the magic system. The one like key in that I think makes it more interesting than sitting at like, I would put this probably at a C tier. I think what takes it above those like lower tiers for me is that individual factions in the series have different approaches and feelings about magic, which does make it feel very lived into the world, but that does not change it from being like a pretty standard idea of how a magic system develops and works. Like certain people can tap into it more than others, and with training you can learn to harness the chaos to do greater things, that sort of stuff.
But like some people are naturally skilled, chosen one, magical.
The sources are like a little bit better than the average person, and if they don't learn to harness it, it can drive them crazy. So
of course
it's a little bit darker than some other interpretations of this kind of system, but the system itself is fairly standard.
All right, we can scotch this into the C tier.
Nice.
Just there we go. All right, let's see what's up next.
I gotta finish the Witcher.
Oh, this one's gonna be. This one might be a bit of a tall ask. Soup's easy on this one. I believe you might have added this one to the list. I would have.
We're talking about Dungeons and Dragons.
We sure are, baby. Now, those of you who have any experience with any of the editions of D&D will know that D&D's magic system is 8 different magic systems stacked up in a trench coat.
Yes.
Based on what TV
going to
shows
talk about D&D 5e's magic system because it is the most relevant and that helps us keep our scope in line.
Yep. Now, my experience with 3.5 is, we got magic. We also got psionics. And cleric magic is different from warlocks, is different from sorcerers, is different from all the fun little prestige classes you can get from other books. Whereas 5e tries to create a sort of unified field theory of magic. As I understand it, the gist is that there's this magical weave that permeates the whole universe. It surrounds us and binds us, you see, and people can tap into messing with it in all kinds of exciting different ways. And it's one of those odd little magic systems because it's kind of got to be a hard magic system because it is a game system that people thus need to follow rules to play in. So like spell slots, spell lists, all that stuff. Things have different charges. Certain class features will let you mess with it. So, like if you're a sorcerer, you have a pool of sorcery points that let you bend the rules but not break them. And, different sources of power exist. So, like, if you're a warlock, your patron can be one of a bunch of different things, but they all kind of work the same way. They, like, feed you a
essentially,
IV drip of power. Yeah.
Every magical class in D&D, with the exception of some of the monk classes that are drawing from their own internal key, are drawing from how they manipulate the weave, right? And the weave is, like, the magic that's all around you everywhere all the time. And just how you can do that changes depending on what class you're drawing from. So the source of all magic is the same. How you manipulate it often manifests in very similar ways, but the source of your ability to manipulate that weave changes depending on whether you're a warlock with like a magical sugar daddy or a wizard who's been reading books since they were 5,
or a sorcerer, the gifted kids of the magical world.
Spending daddy's money on magical spells. Yes.
Oh boy.
Yes, or bards who just get really, really good at playing instruments and then all of a sudden are like, what if I cast a spell with this? I like playing bards a lot.
Of course you do.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
I think D&D is in a unique situation where its magic system is really well suited to the game that it is, because it is, at the end of the day, a role-playing game where every single player is going to try and use it in a different way, but you need to have, rules so that people can play the game. So I think it's an interesting space that this system is working in, because it's not really working with a specific story, it's working with character creation, and that's kind of a different angle for the Magic system to take.
Yeah. I will say that a weakness of D&D is that while it works great as a game mechanic, it doesn't really integrate that super well into the story. Like, you know, the fact that like a low-level wizard can cast a spell 3 times a day and then has to go like hide behind a table and have a juice box is like, look, it's really funny, but there's almost no way to justify that in universe that doesn't make you seem like a total weenie. And the fact is, like, there are a lot of spells in D&D that are just objectively nuts. And then you just kind of have to be like, oh yeah, some wizard 500 years ago made the Sphere of Annihilation spell, which lets you basically summon a black hole that hates you specifically. And it's like, cool. How does one exactly create spells? And it's like, what do you mean? So
it's like the strength of the system is also its weakness, because it has to be rigid and flexible at the same time to allow for players to use it, but then that also doesn't really integrate it with the world that well, because the onus is on the players to integrate their magic through flavor text into the world.
Exactly. And the DM has to do heavy lifting to justify like things like the leveling system, and then when you level up you get new class abilities, potentially get to pick new spells. The DM has to do heavy lifting to integrate that into the plot, because it's just completely inorganic to the narrative. Like, there's no easy way to explain how that works. And that kind of means that while it's not unfeasible, it does mean the DM has to do a lot more work. I do remember, I think in like Critical Role Campaign 2, one of the things that I noticed about the way Liam O'Brien played Caleb is that he'd sort of hint about spells he was going to pick up later by like researching certain things or messing with certain topics, or picking up certain somatic components he would need for later spells, so that by the time he unlocked it, like, there was a narrative reason it made sense. But that was him just fully like kind of playing this character to the hilt. There's no gameplay reason for that. You just wake up one morning, you can turn into a gorilla. So like, yeah.
No, I think this sits at a B tier for me, because it is, I think, a very simple magic system in a lot of ways, but that simplicity means it's not particularly interesting, because the onus is on the player or the DM to make it interesting in their particular version of the world. So it's not necessarily a flawed magic system, it's just not necessarily an exceptional one either, because of user error, essentially.
I'd say that it's soft enough to allow for some fun world building potential. You can just kind of be like, there's a flying city, a wizard did it. What are you gonna yell about? There's an evil swamp, a wizard did it. Whatever. But at the same time, that kind of means that on its own, it doesn't really stand up. It needs to be molded into shape. It's gelatinous on its own. So I'm gonna put this in B tier. I think let's just skosh it in there. Just
put that on in there. Put that in the B tier.
What do we got? Oh, good. We just pop this bad boy in there and make a new one.
You know this one?
Of course I do. I don't remember it as well as I could, but I do remember it some. Oh, is that cat distress I hear?
Sorry, my cat was trying to eat a wire.
Ah, as she deserves. Let her luxuriate.
It's plugged in.
Wouldst thou like to live deliciously? All right, the Dragon Prince, also known as Avatar, but a little bit more this time. Now, the magic system in the Dragon Prince is a 6-element system, not a 4-element system. Don't be silly. And the main gist of it is that certain beings are magical and humans just aren't. So humans are not inherently magical, but many other beings, elves, all kinds of elves, and a lot of different kinds of animals all have these connections to one of the 6 elements. So like there are moon elves and they have magical moon powers, and there are like animals that are like affiliated with certain elements. And the primary way that humans can access magic is by taking raw materials from those animals and burning them up for magic power, because the implication is they can use whatever of that elemental magic is stored in that critter by crushing it up and destroying it with dark magic. So yeah, it's a fairly reasonable way to do it. It's a pretty hard system, except that it isn't. It's hard on paper, and then the main character just figures out a way to do magic. And it's like, okay.
I feel like this might suffer from, it's a hard system in the way it's explained, but the series is about someone finding a way to break that system.
Yeah.
And so the story is almost intentionally breaking the very hard system that it's set in front of us. And I don't know if I can dock it for that, because it's intentional. It's not like they accidentally broke the system.
Chat's drawing a connection
yeah.
between this and the way they do it in the Owl House, which is almost identical in a lot of key ways. All of the witch characters in the Owl House have a natural, well, a literal physical organ full of magic juice that lets them do magic, whereas the main character, Luce, is a human and does not have a magic organ thingy. But she figures out a way to do magic using magical runes, which I think is also how they did it in the Dragon Prince. I recall there being magic runes involved at least once.
Yes, I think when you're harnessing certain magical elements, like Aspero is the one that the main character Callum uses a lot. That's a specific spell using a certain type of energy that's out in the universe. It's like the air one.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember if that is specific to humans or if everyone does it that way.
No, most other people, like, I think part of it is like, with like mages in the Dragon Prince universe can like draw runes in the air, and it's like, hold on, that alone is pretty magical. How are you doing that? But like moon elves and stuff, they can just like do moon magic. And the one cool thing is that because the elements in the Dragon Prince are not like, you know, water, earth, fire, air, it's more like
but then there's
moon,
other ones.
sun. Well, it's like earth and then wind and then like sun and moon and ocean, and the powers they have are different than you might expect from just the physical ones. So like the moon's power is like illusion magic. And the sun's power is setting stuff on fire. Anyway, it's interesting. And they kind of play around with it. So like the fact that they have these magical people and creatures just so tapped into these elements means a lot of them have like really weird powers. So when the moon is, I don't remember if it's full or new, moon elves have like crazy invisibility powers. And there's this sun elf lady who can like turn into a super powered magma monster, which is pretty neat. And of course, dark magic lets them just kind of kill magical creatures and use their powers, which is a quite interesting concept that does tie in well with the overall magic system and produce easy conflict between humans and literally everybody else. The only part that I'm a little bit shaky on is I just genuinely don't remember their explanation for how and why Callum figured out how to do magic on his own.
He got really guilty about using dark magic, and then he went on like a vision quest where he was kind of dying, but also just going through a crazy fever dream, and he really just connected with the sky. He's just like one with the universe now.
Look, I know that it's a tradition to solve all your fictional problems with magical fever dreams, but like, an explanation beyond a magical fever dream would be nice. Like, he's supposed to be the first human in history to ever do this. And, like, he's seriously the first human to, like, eat some bad beans and go to bed and then wake up like, wow, man, like, the universe is just, like, one big thing, you know?
I do think, though, if you take this as a story about him finding that ability, us not necessarily knowing exactly how he did it, and the series still continuing of my current understanding, I think there's more seasons of it coming out.
Yes.
I'm kind of willing to give them a little bit of a pass on that, because it does feel like that's something we might get explored more later on, and it is very integral to the plot that he is able to understand the air in such a way that he can now harness that magical power. I don't think this should be S tier, but I do think it's pretty high, and I don't think that one bit is going to knock it down too far for me.
That's fair. I think just part of it really is just that they didn't really have as much time as they could have to explore all of it, you know? There's a lot of magic that just doesn't get really a chance to be explored. We still don't basically know anything about star elves except for that one. He's kind of a dick. I don't know. I'm kind of inclined to put this potentially as low as B tier just because we haven't really been given a chance to fully explore it yet. But I don't know if we're getting that. Like, I know they planned to have more seasons, but then they were like, you're getting 3, so they were like, okay, here's our big finale, and they were like, okay, maybe we'll give you more, and it's like, all right, thanks.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think this is like high B tier for me, because I'm not entirely sure. I think that they're confirmed for more iterations of this, but I don't know if they are going to do this story or like jump back in time. It's one of those things, like the production history of it is so wild, I can't confidently say that it's getting more series.
All right, let's pop
from
it
what
the
they gave us. Yeah, I think it's a solid B tier. For the most part, the story works really well with the established magic system. It's kind of similar to Avatar, where it's like, this is a hard magic system with different ways of interpreting it, yada, yada, yada.
Yep. And I really like...
Callum's magical fever dream is the thing that's holding us back a little bit.
I really like the world building and the creature building they have in this universe. It's just so exciting, and like, I like the way they do elves. Elves with horns is an inspired design choice. It's just so fun. and they look so wild compared to like, you know, a lot of fantasy elves that are just kind of like, oh look, it's a very pretty white person with pointy ears, and now in this one it's like, this one's covered in star freckles, this one's pink but in like a sort of purpley way, not like a, anyway. All right, let me just add this next one, which again you're gonna have to
alrighty, we're gonna dip back into Indigo's favorite series from middle school, the Inheritance Cycle.
Yeah. Woo!
Like many middle schoolers, I saw dragons and people being bros and way too long books and said, yeah, this sounds like it's right for me.
My experience with this is I watched the Aragon movie once.
Ooh,
and that
was my favorite movie for a really long time. But like favorite movie exclusively from the ages of like, I don't know, 12 to 13. So
I love this movie.
Could be good.
It's
That's
so
why I always knew
bad.
movies could be good. That's sort of my whole brand.
It really doesn't reflect super well in the book.
Magic in the Inheritance Cycle. I actually personally really like this magic system. For all the flaws of the movie and or books, I think that the system that is developed is pretty interesting.
Yeah, as I understand it, it's because they mostly stole it from Ursula K. Le Guin.
Keep in mind, the magic comes from the user's energy. So when you cast a spell, you lock in however much energy you're going to use to cast that spell. And if, for example, you use enough energy that you would pass out, you pass out. Like there's no way to cancel, essentially.
Right.
And if you use too much energy, you die. So there's a inherent risk to using magic, and there's like a clear exhortation that magic users have to use that kind of limits people from just going like full magic ex machina to get out of things.
Yep.
And tied in with that, to use magic, you kind of focus it using words from this ancient language. And essentially, the more words you know, the idea is the more greater variety of magic you can cast. Although this is where it gets a little wibbly. It's about the user's intention. So if you can connect, for example, the word water with gemstone in your mind and create a gemstone related effect afterwards, people who hear you say water out loud don't need to understand how you made that connection. It's about the caster's intention. So it's a little bit wibbly on like how exactly the ancient language is applied, but essentially energy-based magic system. You have your well of personal energy, and you have to know certain words to be able to get the effect that you want. Is how it's laid out.
The impression I've gotten from the books, the movie, and the comment section is...
I think that it's an interesting system. I personally like when a magic system has the limit of like you can only do as much magic as your being or yourself allows for. I think that puts an interesting limitation on it.
Hold on. Chat, please hold.
Red just messaged me in the Discord. Can you hear me? No, I cannot hear you.
Indigo,
Should I
no!
be able to hear you talking
yes!
Right now?
Oh, dear.
Oh, boy.
Okay.
I can see that you are talking. I'm just not getting any output. Why is that? Hold for technical difficulties. Wouldn't be an OSP stream without it.
All right. You know what? Just a second, everybody. Can you hear me now, baby?
Red?
Hello? Yes.
I can't hear you.
She fully can't hear me.
All
right. Hope everyone's having a good time.
What'll we do?
Oh. She, hello? Can you hear me now? Hello? 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 Oh, she fully can't hear me, guys. Alrighty, just a second.
Oh, no, I can't hear you at all.
Okay, Discord has my input.
Chat, I'm so sorry. They can hear both of us, but we can't hear each other.
Yeah, that's kind of... I saw oh, wait, you still can't hear me. All right, chat, don't worry. I'm just going to disconnect, and then we'll be right back. So we won't be able to hear Indigo for a hot second, but you'll be able to hear me. It's the Just Me show right now. All right, let's see. Oh, right, I gotta... Hello? I'm getting no response, so I'm guessing she can't hear me.
Okay,
all right.
I'm gonna try leaving this call and jumping back in because I don't hear you and I'm worried it may just be on my end.
Yeah, okay, good call. All right, chat. So if you can hear me, put a banana in the chat. And then, when Indigo gets back, I'm going to assume you'll be able to hear her fine, because I've been able to hear her, and it's getting routed through my audio. All right,
Can
good.
you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
I hear you.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. I've been able to hear you the whole time. So...
again, and now it works fine. So I
Ah.
guess that's that.
Fantastic. Yeah. I kind of figured that because like I had some comments on the Aragon thing. And when you were talking when I was talking, I was like, oh, you know what? I just don't think she can hear me. So what I said was that my impression of the inheritance cycle was that the writer read some Earthsea books and was like, oh, this is such a good idea. I'm just gonna take it. And like, I mean, I can respect that. It is a very good magical system. It's Le Guin basically came up with the first idea for a true name magic system, and we'll get there. Don't worry, guys. It's on my list. But the gist of it is that everything there's people in chat who are like, yeah, reading Le Guin after reading the inheritance cycle was a wild ride because it's like you're like, wow, this is such a good, incredibly original concept, and then you read Earthsea and you're like, oh, well, it's a good concept. So I don't know if I want to put this too high up when it's just blatantly taking from another really good magic system.
Entirely fair. I think it is a good system, but it is sort of just a copy paste with some like words lightly changed from Earthsea. So it's like, well, I don't know how high you can put it. I maybe say like C.
Yeah, that sounds fair
depending on how you're feeling, because it is a solid system, and I think it's executed pretty well in the books. But it is
yeah.
It isn't an original system, so to speak.
And, you know, it doesn't have to be original. But, like, in this case, it's like the kid was 18 when he wrote it, and he's been pretty upfront about that. And it's like, I think that almost everyone's first writing project is made up of pieces of all the writing that they love. And, you know, just most people don't publish that and then turn it into a franchise. So no complaints. But I've got no objections putting this in C, possibly the line between C and Deer. And I don't know if we're going to get anyone mad by putting this higher than both Lord of the Rings and The Force.
Hey, you know, if The Force had set out specific rules for how much they could force, maybe it would be fully in the C tier. That's getting back in the way.
Yeah. This one's going to be fun. I'm just going to, you know what? I'm just going to shorten the next one just a skosh, just so it doesn't eat up the entire line we end up putting it on.
Yeah, you could just say this is probably, I'd say JRPGs as a whole. Look, I know there are infinite little JRPG series that all have very specific differences in how their use of magic, but we're going to consider this like the classic JRPG mana-based system that is, I think, on this list because it is interesting to talk about how that is tied into gameplay and how the system is serving the medium that it's in more so than it is serving like lore and the game itself. So in a lot of JRPGs you use mana, which is essentially just how many times your character can cast a spell before you need to rest or you lose access to it or whatever it is for that specific game. In Final Fantasy, you can use a game as much mana as you have can be used and distributed among your spells as many times as you want, as long as you still have mana left to cast a spell. In some of the classic Fire Emblem games, if you have a tome, you can use it 20 times before the tome, I don't know, incinerates or something.
Right.
So it's essentially you have a limited pool of magic that you can use to do different things. And now each of these games also has different types of magic. In Final Fantasy, you get like white magic versus black magic, and it's what's support and healing and what's damage and yada yada yada. But essentially what I think we're really looking at here is magic as a resource management system as opposed to some of the other systems we've seen so far. And from a gameplay standpoint, I think that makes a lot of sense. You don't want your player to be able to just bam fireball. I mean, we've all been there, but there's a certain point where if they could just blast their best spell over and over again, the game probably wouldn't be as much fun.
Yeah, that's fair. I think this one is a little bit tricky because, as Chad is pointing out, this is covering a lot of ground.
Yes.
A lot of different magic systems integrated into their respective games to varying degrees. Like they pointed out, putting like Final Fantasy and Shin Megami Tensei in the same category is pretty whack. But ultimately, I feel like the problem we're running into here is that like this is, at its most basic level, a magic system, and that is a way to integrate magic into a gameplay system. It essentially says, all right, you have a pool of magic to draw on, and you can spend from it to cast spells, and once you're out, you're out. And that's pretty similar to what they do in D&D, but, different, because it's a video game. I think this one's a little bit difficult to rank because, every game handles this to different degrees of goodness.
No, entirely. I'm seeing people in chat say you should probably just call this a mana magic system, and that's kind of more accurate. I think, Yeah. um, we could be here forever just going through how different specific games go through their magic systems, which is kind of what we're already doing. Oh my gosh. But I think the strength of the mana system is that it works in a video game context, but if you put it into a book, it would be incredibly tedious and kind of boring. Like I don't think I would enjoy reading about someone having to go through their resource management, but when I'm playing Final Fantasy, for example, I'm like, okay, I'm in the zone, baby. I know how much mana I have left for the rest of this level.
You don't want to read about Aragon opening his inventory and flipping through his spell list.
Yeah, so he pulls out a tome and he's like, I can use this one 4 more times before it just disintegrates and becomes useless to me. I don't know. I think it's an interesting conversation to have about the application of the system in the medium, but I don't know if it makes it a good system necessarily. I think it's pretty middling, because it so much depends on the game that it's integrated with.
I think I'd be comfy putting this as far down as D tier just because what it is the simplest possible explanation for how do we gamify something as loose as magic, which is literally like you can do whatever you want as long as you have the points for it. And that's a way to do it, but it often produces, kind of like we were talking about with D&D, gameplay and story segregation, where it's like, why is my all-powerful wizard weak as a kitten just because he's, like, cast 3 of these spells today? Like, why does he have to go take a 12-hour nap before he can do this again? Or, I saw someone in chat be like, why can't they just use a Phoenix down on Aerith? And it's like, yeah, stuff like that. They always have trouble kind of explaining why you can't use your phenomenal cosmic powers to solve problems that the plot needs to have happen. So if we're going to generalize this far, I'm willing to put this pretty low.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think this is because of its generality and also that it is a system with the littlest bit of magic tied into it. It's pretty. I'd say D tier is probably pretty fair.
Yeah, okay.
Not to say I don't love some of the games that use it, but that is an entirely different discussion from how the system works.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. What do we got? Oh, yeah, a fun one.
One for red and indigo, but mostly red.
It must be Christmas. All right, let me just get the punctuation right on this one. If we're gonna,
this is important. Gotta get those dashes in the right place.
Yeah, you know it,
Chat,
baby.
what do you think the dashes are for?
Alrighty, let's talk about Yu-Gi-Oh! Or its proper name,
it's
Yu-Gi-Oh! Oh, baby. The magic system in Yu-Gi-Oh! And for the record, we're talking about like OG Yu-Gi-Oh! Maybe a little bit of Season 0 in there for flavor, but like we're not getting into 5Ds or whatever the fuck they do in GX or Zexal or Vrains, whatever the others are.
No. We're talking everything Dungeon Dice Monsters era and around.
Yes. Now, the core magic system of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is wildly inconsistent. I mean, come on. They start off with one thing, and then they're like, actually, it would be more interesting if this was this thing. And then the publishers were like, you got this card game. We really want to merchandise. And it's like, okay, I guess it's all about the card game now. So when the manga first started, it was a horror manga. And the premise was the main character had reassembled a cursed Egyptian artifact and gotten his ass possessed, or possibly split off like an evil split personality. It wasn't really clear. And this evil split personality had magic powers and would go on vigilante justice sprees against school bullies and slightly annoying people. And then at some point they were like, actually, this is about the power of friendship. And he's just misunderstood. And fine. And it's also about this card game. Buy now at your local GameStop. So, like, in terms of a hard magic system, it's not. In fact, the magic system doesn't even make sense within the confines of individual arcs of the story. Like, the main character has magic powers and then never, ever uses them. The bad guys can do magic. One of the bad guys can, like, make the cards real and uses this to kill several people, at least in the
I think it's fun how the series both has magical choosy artifacts and just people who seem to be able to do magic through, I don't know, Egypt stuff.
Well, those are mostly the choosy magical artifacts. The Millennium
not
items.
Always.
Well, yeah, that's true. The Millennium items are all magic, except the Millennium puzzle, where the magic power seems to be you get an ancient Egyptian pharaoh downloaded into your head to take your love interests.
You get to make a buddy. You get a friend.
You get a friend. I mean, that's literally it. Like,
you've unlocked the power of friendship.
Well, genuinely, when they're kind of like, oh, all the Millennium items have magic powers, well, why doesn't the Millennium Puzzle? It's like, oh, it does. The power of unity. So it literally does explain that all the power of friendship bullshit is because they have this ancient cursed Egyptian artifact puzzle labyrinth nightmare dimension thing, which is very funny. Just objectively, such a funny use for a cursed Egyptian artifact.
Oh boy.
I don't think this is a particularly good magic system. I think it had a lot of potential and then just didn't get used because, like, they had to keep finding reasons to A, solve all their problems with card games, and then B, try and artificially reintroduce stakes back into those card games. So it's like, we can't just have a normal hostage situation. It has to be resolved with a card game.
I think what this series really has is the power of branded marketing. And I don't know if that as a magic system really is all that spectacular.
Yeah.
I don't care if the advertisement for the cards are integrated into a TV show, it still doesn't feel particularly magical.
No. And then, like, the characters with explicit magic powers, sometimes it just doesn't work. It's like, Ishizu can just see the future until she can't because Kaiba's like, fuck you, hard enough to just break the future. And she's like, wow, what? Now my powers don't work. Merrick can just fully brainwash people and also has an evil alter ego with magical powers, which is interesting and never explained. Oh, what are the others? Oh, right, Pegasus's weird mind reading thingy, which also allows him to see the future
of them are
enough.
Just different flavors of mind reading.
Well, most of them, yes.
Mind
but
stuff.
also Pegasus does that thing where it's like, aha, I'm going to duel you through this VHS tape. A pre-recording of me is going to beat you, and it's like,
steal your grandfather's soul.
Oh yeah, that part's funny because, like, when you initially see it, you're like, wow, he's dueling him through a VHS tape. His power is incredible. And then the more you think about it, the more you're like, how?
Yeah.
Excuse me?
I feel really
oh right, and Atlantis exists. Thank you, chat, for reminding me that also Atlantis is real.
We can't forget about the Atlantis arc.
Yeah, the evil bikers from Atlantis, everyone's favorite
and as if
season.
Everything wasn't already muddy enough. Sometimes Kaiba just comes up with a technology that does everything that the magic also does. And it's like, well, dual monsters are holograms, but they're real holograms, and now we're inside the game, which again is a card game.
Well, that's the thing. Like, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is one of the only shows where I kind of like the filler seasons more than the main seasons because the filler seasons have to contrive reasons for the stakes to actually be high. And it's always, if you die in the game, you die for real. And it's like, you know what? At least that's something. At least they remembered to add consequences to the card game. Yeah, I think that Yu-Gi-Oh! As a magic system is very bad. It's to the detriment of the story rather than improving it. It doesn't really allow for much.
It's fun, but it's an easy E tier. It's just bad.
Yeah.
It's not a good magic system.
Yeah, no, it's an absolute party, but it just doesn't make any sense.
Love that it's a terrible magic system, but it is still a terrible magic system. If it was a good magic system, I probably wouldn't have enjoyed the show as much as I did.
100%, yeah. And almost everyone's magic power boils down to make the cards real. And it's like, guys, if you have to use magic to reintroduce the stakes you took away by making this about card games... The manga balances this a little better by letting some problems be solved by, like, punching things. Sometimes. The manga lets Joey punch stuff a lot. It's great. It's fun. But then the anime's like, no, but Joey's not allowed to punch anybody. Kaiba can beat him in a fist fight. And it's like, no, he fucking can't. Kaiba has no reason to be good at anything like that. Bandit Keith is supposed to be a poser who has no idea what he's doing. So Joey can just, like, judo flip him and be like, look, if this were a street fight, I'd just kill you. But we're doing card games, so I guess you're okay.
I'm not a professional voice actor, but if I ever got into it, the one kind of character I desperately would want to voice is anyone who seems like they could be a one-off villain in Yu-Gi-Oh! Your Bandit Keith types, you know? Just a straight gimmick who appears for like 2 episodes and then dips. I think that is beautiful.
Johnny Steps is stepping up. God, man. Such a bad show, but also so funny.
Fun.
Oh
so
boy.
Good.
Speaking of extremely broad categories...
Yes, so the next category is magical girls, and the reason we're not subdividing it into different magical girl shows is because I think I've watched way more of those than Red has.
Yes, you absolutely have.
And a lot of them share a lot of commonalities. So we're going to talk about the commonalities of the magical girl magic systems. And there's a few points here that I want to break down. For context, they're my favorite shows. I watched so many magical girl shows as a kid. Winx Club, Witch, Sailor Moon, obviously, Magical, etc., etc., Card Captor Sakura. all magical girl shows more or less have some sort of external magic that chooses wielders. Sometimes this is ancestry, sometimes this is a magical choosy artifact, but essentially you're getting a magic system where someone starts non-magical and becomes magical by the end.
Yep.
There's usually a transformation involved in letting them use their magic. Sometimes they can use a little bit of magic when they're not transformed, but then they get much more powerful when they have their magic form. But generally, like, they have to do the magical girl's transformation sequence in order to use their special powers.
Every time.
And at the end of the day, everyone gets the power of friendship power-ups. So if you want to get stronger, you're going to be looking at bonding with your fellow sailor scouts or your fellow witches or whatever have you. And in the series where you do have a team, which is most of them, everyone's going to have a specific power set that they adhere to. So they might have one like overarching thing that they can do, like kicking better or being faster, but then they might also each have an element that they're tied to and can only do spells within that range. So limited scope per character on a team of transforming folks that have their magic from usually some external source and can all get stronger through the power of friendship. It's a pretty stock magic system, which is why we're talking about it as a group rather than an individual show. Although the show that I think is the quintessential example is, of course, Sailor Moon.
Well,
There's a lot that fall into this category.
Yeah. I've always kind of considered magical girls to be topologically similar to, like, Super Sentai, you know? Like,
yes, exactly.
Color-coded.
Power Rangers and magical girls are the same characters in different fonts.
Exactly.
Those were my two favorite kinds of shows as a kid, and that is not an accident.
Yep. It's basically just when you transform, do you get a full suit of armor or do you get a miniskirt? That's it.
Yes.
My exposure to magical girls is fairly limited. I've seen 11 episodes total of Sailor Moon, which does not even get you to meet like half the Sailor Scouts.
No, not even a little bit.
Usagi is still fully in the crying during every fight phase of her development. It's just very funny. I did watch all of Madoka at one point just because it was one of those things I felt like I should watch. It was like a cultural staple. It wasn't that long. It was depressing. I've been told it's not as groundbreaking as it maybe thinks it is, but, you know, whatever. And I read almost all of the comics for Witch when I was in middle school, and I loved it. It was so fun.
That had a banging theme song.
I'll take your word for it. The comic did not come with a theme song.
It should have. It should have included a CD-ROM that you could have put into the CD player at your home and heard the Witch theme song.
Yep, that would have been pretty fun. Anyway. I also deeply appreciated the high percentage of pretty boy bad guys in which it was all of them. The answer was all of them.
That's a magical girl standby.
Yeah, of course. Anyway, so magical girls as a genre, in terms of the magic system, it tends to be that like it's like a superhero show, but you come with your own team. So like, you know, you get powers and it's thematic. And I recommend, if you're curious and you're looking for a webcomic, look up and read Sleepless Domain. It's a magical girl webcomic, and it's depressing, but like not in like a kind of forced way. It's just really interesting and intriguing. And gay. It's also gay. Anyway, so it seems like when you're, you know, a magical girl and you get chosen by whatever, you know, magic cat or giant head or whatever, you get your special piece of jewelry and you magically awaken into a slightly taller form with a miniskirt and have some set of magic powers, a fairly standard one that perhaps easily turns into accessories that they can sell with your action figure. And then you and your team go and fight, you know, a monster of the week, and then you deal with the big bad, and then that's kind of it for the season. And they can remix this formula, but ultimately that's kind of how it works. And that's the impression I've gotten from Magical Girls. And it's a very simple and fairly rigid structure, except that Magical Girls sometimes get more powers as the plot demands because of the power of friendship or the power of being the main character.
Or power creep.
Or power creep too. Yeah. So, I don't know. I feel like this could go almost anywhere on the tier list depending on what lens we look at it through. Because, like, the power sets in Witch I remember being pretty rigid. It was fully elemental. It was like, all right, you got, you know, wind, fire, water, plants. What was another one? Was there a rock one or was it just plants?
A lot of
and heart. Yeah, quintessence, which is a pretty common one to do. The fifth element is usually heart, or the sixth element is heart, or something like that. The pink
you
one
get
is
some
usually
variants
the
on which elements are, you know, used on the team depending on the series. I think Winx Club has, you know, like music and technology as elements as opposed to like going for straight elementals. So, you know, you get some variants on that, but the key is that each character typically has one thing that they're drawing from or can use the power of.
Yeah, and it's all very thematic, and, you know, everyone gets a color coordinated outfit and a best friend squad and all that stuff. And it's pretty solid. You know, it's a fun way to do it. tends to be fairly concrete, often runs into the issue of like, why can't they just do this thing that solved the problem last time? But that's a fairly common problem in all serialized media with superpowers in. So like, oh yeah, and it is worth pointing out that Madoka, which is a purposeful kind of, I want to say, deconstruction of the magical girl genre, has it so that like the magical choosy entity is actually evil, and magical girls are like a natural resource being used to like reduce the entropy level of the universe or something like that. So whatever. And they eventually turn into the very monsters that the magical girls have to fight. But when they transform, they get to do one wish. And at the end of the series, the main character finally becomes a magical girl, because the opening of that show lies to you. It shows you her in magical girl form constantly. And the question is always like, when's she going to make her wish? When's she going to become a magical girl? And the answer is in the finale, and she turns into God. So, whatever.
Yeah.
I guess it's like, it's a nice, simple format that I don't know if it's exceptionally swanky enough to deserve a particularly high ranking, but it's not bad, so it doesn't deserve a low ranking. Like,
I mean, obviously I'm a little bit sweeter on this particular format through nostalgia, but I think this is maybe a solid C, possibly mid CD tier. I think it's a solid system. It's usually very internally consistent, and you kind of know what you're going to get with it, which I think is a strength of it, because it's meant to be a format for more personal stories than it is necessarily like, here's the magic to save the world.
yeah.
But that said, it does sometimes suffer from power creep, and since we're not talking about one specific series, there's different applications of it that are better than others.
Yeah.
So I'd put this in the middle somewhere.
I'd say C is fine. I also understand that like the archetypical magical girl, Sailor Moon, has almost Goku levels of like multiple transformations and powered
Sailor
up
Moon
forms
bodies
and
your
outfits.
fave, and that's true. Although I will say I've been rewatching the series recently with Noir from the Rolling with Difficulty podcast, because he has never seen it, and I watched it when I was very young, and so we're rewatching it together, and it's been only bangers the whole way through.
Sorry, quick emergency check. Indigo, can you hear me right now?
I can hear you right now. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Fantastic. Okay. Anytime we talk over each other, I'm like, oh god, it's happening again. So,
yes. We're watching Sailor Moon. There was a point to this. I think while it does definitely have power creep, I think that the rate at which they get new powers and what those new powers do is actually fairly balanced, at least through season 3. I have not gotten to seasons 4 and 5 yet.
Yes. Alrighty, let's add the last of our for those of you at home, our list is kind of subdivided by like things we're both very well acquainted with, things we're less acquainted with, and things we kind of have to bring up because they're pop culture staples, even though neither of us really know what we're talking about. So we're about to hit the last of the ones that we're both really solid on.
Yes.
Or at least that at least one of us is really solid on and the other one doesn't have any strong opinions on. And this one is one we've already discussed just a little bit. The Owl House. Yes. Now, if you're watching this as a VOD later, for the record, the finale of The Owl House is not yet aired, but we are sort of in the very final season, so things are sort of winding up to it. Owl House has a pretty solid, fairly solid hard magic system. It's actually got like a couple different hard magic systems nested, with the explanation that one of them is the way that witches used to do wild magic, and one of them is the way that they do it now when they've been subdivided by like category, so that they have to specialize into specific covens. So the main character of the Owl House, Luce, is a human girl who gets isekai'd into this magical dimension that's basically just hell. And she meets this fun witch lady, the Owl Lady, Ida, who she's like, please teach me how to do magic. And Ida's like, sure. And then 3 episodes later, she's like, yeah, I have no idea how to teach you how to do magic. You're a human. I don't think you can do magic. And it's just like, wow, that's very on brand. This is in part made by some of the team that made Gravity Falls, and you can kind of tell Ida and Grunkle Stan are very kind of same character, different fonts, and possibly X's.
Yes, I think there's like a overarching canon.
There's a couple things
Las
tying
Vegas.
them together.
Like, that's the metaverse.
Yes. So the gist is that as Luce attempts to learn a way to do magic that doesn't involve having a magical bile gland attached to her body, she sort of realizes that there are runes hidden in the elements around her, and when she draws the runes on pieces of paper, they produce effects, and then she later experiments and can combine the runes into specific effects, which is quite cool. So she ends up sort of being able to draw runes that do specific spells, like turning her invisible for as long as she's holding her breath, or creating a big ice pillar, or stuff like that. So it's quite cool. And she ends up having this very unique form of magic that she organically develops throughout the series, while everyone around her has a natural talent for magic and can just kind of do it by drawing these glowy circles in the air. And it involves, like, they can do certain magical things that maybe Luz hasn't figured out the rune combination for, so, like, they can make these goo abomination monsters and just kind of have them do stuff, and she doesn't know how to do that, as far as I know.
Yeah, the way that she sort of gets these runes is by often inspecting some natural object or something, kind of seeing the... Well, she looks at a snowflake, for example, and sees the rune that later gets the ability to create ice effects. So it's tied into the observable world.
Yep. Yeah. So it's essentially a very solidly constructed magic system, in the sense that the whole point of this story is to watch Luz grow and improve over the course of the show, and to watch her develop these more intense relationships with the characters around her, and sort of struggle with the question of whether to stay here or go back home, and un-isekai herself. And the fact is, it is very difficult to create a magic system where we, the audience, understand at any point exactly what abilities our main character has, what their limitations are, and what they can grow to do. And I think that the Owl House pulls it off to a degree that I have not seen in almost anything else, because we have all these natural witches running around who have all these abilities. You know, they can do, like, musical magic, and they can do abomination magic, and they can do all this crazy stuff that Luz doesn't necessarily know how to do. But if it's essentially just a free-form, reflexive way of doing what she can also do with rune combinations, the implication is that if Luz can find the right combination, she might be able to replicate all these effects. And it's just a matter of, can she figure it out? And they show us her figuring certain things out. They show us, there's like a whole episode dedicated to her teaching a couple characters, like, what she's figured out of different ways to combine runes, which is just great. That's just a really fantastic way of doing it. So, like, at this point in the show, we have a pretty solid idea of what she can do easily, what she's a little shaky on, what's still experimental, and what she hasn't figured out yet. And because everyone else can just casually, like, sling fireballs and grow plant walls and all that stuff, you know, we sort of have an idea of where Luz might be able to get to if she can figure it out, and how long it's going to take her to get there, which I'm willing to put this quite high up on the list, just because I have never seen a magic system define its own rules so well, while also giving the audience and the characters access to this more free-form soft magic system perspective on what the character might become capable of doing if they sort of climb up the ladder one step at a time.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think that it's a very well-defined magic system, and it's an interesting one to see play out as well. You touched on the coven system versus wild magic, which is what Ida uses. And the way that it's explained in the show is essentially the coven system is sort of this later imposed thing by the current emperor.
Yes.
And his coven, and only folks in the Emperor's coven can use all types of magic. Everyone else gets, like, magical tattooed, and then they get locked into whatever coven they're in, and that type of magic after they get out of high school or whatever.
Yep.
But even that is, like, very clearly defined and tied into the plot of the show. It's very clear in the world that that's what happens, and this, like, dichotomy between the old ways and this new coven system is relatively well laid out. So even divorced from Luz's interpretation of the magic system and how she experiences it and how it affects her story, the system wider is also very well explained. So I'm inclined to put this quite high as well. Plus, I love that they had to draw circles to use it. I think it's a really fun whenever there's a very physical manifestation of magic. Something that's not on our list to discuss because it was not significant enough to discuss is the kid that would be king has a magic system where when they cast spells, they do, like, crazy snaps and claps and things and, like, flail their arms around to do spells, and it's so cool looking.
It's always good to have a magic system with a nice physical component, but I think
it just looks good.
I think I've got no complaints putting this in A tier. I think,
yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, it's possible that, like, whatever they do in the finale might make me want to kick this up to S tier, completely honestly, but, like, depending on how, like, I've got some theories over what they might do, but, like, I don't want to say anything in case I get my hopes up or jinx it or something. But anyway, I think it's very exciting. All right,
put in the A tier and be like, we'll see.
We'll see how it goes. All right.
Now we're getting on the part of the list where one or both of us is either if you're on it or only one of us knows the thing.
Where we kind of know what we're talking about, but maybe not that much. And to start us off, let me just make the text backs. We've got, Fairy Tail, that anime that was really big during my formative years in high school. And
had
it
that
was,
banging theme.
whew, it was a party. It was very weird, but also a party. And what we were talking about this before the stream, and we were like, wait, what is the magic system for Fairy Tail? How does it work? And like we did a little looking, and it's like, oh no, it's real complicated.
It's kind of just whatever the story demands a character do to be cool is sort of what I think I got from some Googling.
That's really it.
Personally, I don't know how much there is to say about this one, so I'm interested to hear your thoughts.
Well, that's the thing. Like, it's very clearly, like, I feel like Fairy Tail is one of those things where the creator, who clearly loves coming up with many, many characters, considering all them side characters, like, this is one of those things where they were like, they came up with a whole bunch of different characters with all these fun powers, and then had to retroactively be like, oh, and it's this, actually. And it wasn't even particularly consistent across it. For a while, it looks like there are 3 kinds of magic. There's like celestial gate key magic, which is what the main character Lucy can do, where she has no magic of her own, but she has these magical keys and she can summon Zodiac characters to fight for her. And I always kind of got the impression that there are only like 12 keys in the entire world.
I think to kind of like sum up that school of magic is that one of the forms of magic in that universe is object based. So you have an object of power like the key, and that's where you can draw your power from, essentially.
Yeah, there's that. And then there's every other kind of magic. And then there's Dragon Slayer magic. And Dragon Slayer magic is like, we only see it from people who were like raised by dragons. Mostly the other main character, Natsu. And then like everyone else has a completely different kind of magic. Like, oh, she's got magical cards. She's got magic guns. He's got ice magic, which isn't dragon magic. You might think it is because everyone else who's a dragon is elemental, but no. And then there's a different Dragon Slayer who's like, oh, he's got lightning magic, but also he's not actually a Dragon Slayer. It's just he has almost exactly the same powers, but he's an artificial lightning dragon mage. And it's
I think
just
this
like,
is all sort of dancing around why I was hesitant to put Fairy Tail on this list, which is to say, I don't know if I can identify what the magic system is other than it's whatever is the coolest thing a character could do to fight at any given moment.
Right, and honestly, I have a hard time being mad about that because it's like the platonic ideal of a shonen anime to a certain extent. No limitations, everyone's ridiculously overpowered, but there's always a reason for the main character to be the most overpowered of them all, especially after he gains the ability to like eat other kinds of dragon magic. Anyway, I have not rewatched Fairy Tail since I first watched it, and I haven't finished reading the manga because I feel like it would spoil the magic if I went back. So I can't promise it aged well at all. I'm willing to put this in like a D tier just because of how much I remember enjoying it, but not because it's good.
I enjoyed the show quite a bit. And the
music
stuck in my head forever.
Slapped. It was really good. I have some of it saved on my computer that I've never used the soundtrack.
The magic system is I don't think the magic system exists if it even is that good. It's just sort of like a reskin of a superhero system, so I would put it in B or E tier.
Yeah,
I would probably put it next to Yu-Gi-Oh! Honestly. It's about as internally consistent.
You know what? That's fair. I feel like the one thing it has over Yu-Gi-Oh! Is that the story is not fighting with its own magic system to make the plot happen. The magic system exists entirely to serve the plot. It gives you a bunch of wacky wild card characters with weird powers, and sometimes you run into other characters with similar powers. Like, I remember how much of a big deal it was the first time they ran into an evil Dragon Slayer, and it was like, whoa, he's like Natsu, but a dick! And like, it's so funny. My favorite thing about Fairy Tail is every time they introduce bad guys, they go out of their way to be like, this one's real evil, what a dick he is. And then every time they get redeemed. So they have to be like, I'm real sorry about that time I crucified you and destroyed your guild hall. I'm a good person now. I play guitar in a band.
If you want to be generous, stick it in D tier, but I feel like this might be an E tier for me.
All right, we can nudge it down a few pixels. Down it goes. Again, these don't reflect on the quality of the show or how much fun we had.
Yu-Gi-Oh! Fairy Tail, 2 very formative shows for me.
Oh, yeah. Thanks,
magic systems were not their strength.
Nope. Ludo History's in chat supporting our decision to put it in E tier.
Yes.
Oh, God. This show is so fun.
This next one
so
is
stupid.
all you, Red.
Oh, yay! Yeah. Once again, continuing the animes. This one's going to be fun because most of the people in chat are going to be in exactly your boat of having no fucking clue what I'm talking about. But for those of you who know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. It's Slayers, baby. This was like one of the early, not like the earliest anime. We're not talking like Astro Boy and like Speed Racer, but this was like 90s era, you know, when the field of anime dubbing was just starting to come together. You know, it's got a lot of big names in it before they got good. It's got Eric Stewart. It's got Crispin Freeman. a lot of big names.
Mhm.
It's kind of just like if someone took D&D and made it an anime. It's got a few different magic systems, but they're pretty internally consistent. Mostly. They're mostly internally consistent. A lot of the plot centers on the specific mechanics of magic and what it can and can't do. Because this show kind of makes its life difficult right out the gate by making the main character, Lena Inverse, just the most ridiculously overpowered mage ever. She's just this ridiculously OP sorceress. She regularly solves her problems by unleashing the magical equivalent of a tactical nuclear strike, the Dragon Slave.
Oh boy.
And it's fun. And that basically means that any problem that can be solved by just blowing it up, she can just solve by blowing it up. So they kind of have to conspire to come up with actual threats, and a lot of it's pretty cartoony. But one of the interesting things that they do is that this means that she can kind of face off against some pretty ridiculous, overpowered threats, because one things that they establish in the magic system of this world is that her kind of magic, black magic, is drawn from these incredibly powerful, like, evil, chaotic sources. And one of the main bad guys they deal with in the very first season is this incredibly powerful demon lord named Nigdo, and he was, like, split into pieces centuries ago, and one of the pieces just got reborn as a guy and just got unsealed as another guy. And now he's causing problems, and they're like, Lena, why can't you just blow him up with your magical tactical nuclear strike? And she's like, well, unfortunately, Nigdo is the magical source I draw on for the tactical nuclear strike. So, in order to defeat him, she needs to draw on an even scarier magical scary source, which she does to unleash the Giga Slave. And she's pretty casual about it. And then in the next season, they're like, here's why you should never, ever do that again, because it will literally destroy the entire universe if you mess it up even slightly. And it's like, okay, cool. So I think this show is pretty dumb, but I also had an absolute blast watching all of the media that they'd created for it. And then I was bummed that there wasn't more, which is a pretty good sign. So I think in terms of magic systems, it's actually surprisingly well put together and coherent, because it establishes there's like this whole power hierarchy of super powerful forces and stuff like that. It also has a few other kinds of magic running around. One of the main characters is she's like a cleric, basically. She's like a white mage, but she mostly solves problems by punching them. And so she can do like healing stuff, and she's kind of a specialist. And I think it's implied that other like sorcerers could do that. It's more what they choose to specialize in than what they physically can or can't do. So yeah, I would actually put this quite high up, because they go out of their way to just thoroughly explain everything about it. Whenever they bring in other sources, they explain how, this new, like, crazy powerful Eldritch Abomination nightmare monster we're fighting, it fits here on the power hierarchy, so we can't use anything like this to defeat it, and we can try this, but it probably won't work, and we need to use this. And, like, one of the characters is running around with a magic sword, and it's, like, the Sword of Light, and its magic is drawing on sort of light magic, but then they deal with a bad guy who I believe is actually the source of power for the Sword of Light. So there's all this interesting stuff, because, of course, any small-scale physical problem like bandits or an individual mortal bad guy, just not an issue, because they can just drop a tactical nuclear strike on it and then leave. So they have to be fighting, like, evil gods and demon lords and stuff like that. Yeah, so I'd put this A tier or S tier, completely honestly, just because as far as magic systems go, like, the whole point of it, at least in the anime, is to explain how it works and why they have to actually do some problem solving rather than dropping a big nuke on it and walking away.
Is it that they have to do the problem solving to explain the magic system, or to explain, why these guys are going up against such powerful threats, though?
Well, it's more like they have to do problem solving. Well, okay. Essentially, by making the main character so hilariously overpowered, they kind of have to keep explaining, like, the specifics of the universe itself, because the threats they're dealing with are such cosmic, massive issues that, like, they have to explain, okay, this isn't just a big, scary bad guy. He's the source of about 80% of all evil magic, so we can't use most of that stuff. And, like, there's a whole arc in the second season where the bad guy is, like, another seriously scary, cosmic, evil bad guy. There's like two of them running around in this arc, and one of them is more powerful than the other and just kills him immediately. Also, fun fact about that, in the dub, the first evil bad guy is voiced by Dan Green, like of Yu-Gi-Oh fame, and he just completely acts everybody else under the table the whole time, and then he gets killed by the other guy who's voiced by the voice actor for Joey Wheeler, who's also acting everyone else under the table. The dub is not good, but those parts are very funny. And that guy's whole evil plan is he wants to force Lena to unleash the Giga Slave again to actually destroy the world this time. He just really wants the world to dissolve back into primordial chaos. Spoiler alert, that does not work, but the reason it doesn't work is pretty cool. Anyway, what I'd say is that, like, because they overpower the characters so much, this means that the problems they deal with have so much connection to the magic system of the world that they kind of have to keep explaining it, and, like, where things are in the hierarchy, why certain things they tried last time won't work. And it's just, it's more thought put into a magic system than I've seen in a lot of cases, just because they kind of have to be like, hey, we have a character who can blow up an entire town really easily. We probably need to explain why that won't solve this problem. Yeah, so, yeah, the parts of chat that know what I'm talking about are like, yes, S tier, and everyone else is like, neat. So, yeah.
I mean, it in terms of how the system actually works, it sounds very similar to either a mana-based system or and kind of combined with the D&D class system. So,
well, yeah.
You gasped like you just realized something and I can't.
Well, no, it's more like you can't imply that I have to put this that low down on the tier list.
I'm not saying you have to put it that low down on the tier list. I don't feel comfortable telling you where to put it on the list because I know literally nothing about this series other than that was just explained. So I trust your opinion on this. I don't really have a lot of insight to add.
Yeah, I feel a little weird putting this all the way at the top when it's, you just taken my word for it. But I'd easily put this in A tier. Sure. I think it's fun. And there's a lot of cases where they're like, oh yeah, this low level like fireball power I use comes from this low level but still really scary bad guy we're fighting, voiced by Dan Green. So it's just, I don't know, it's cool.
I trust chat that it is a very good series. I just haven't watched it yet. I have to sleep sometimes.
All right. Well, chat can complain all they want. I'm not changing it. All right. Do we want to skip to, yeah, okay. Yeah. All right. This one's going to be fun because I don't think either of us know what we're talking about with this one.
No. I think we need to just mention this one and like give it the honorable mention, but then maybe
put it in the special
put it,
box,
like next to the put it next to the top where the title is, and just be like the we know it's there zone, but we just don't know anything to say about it.
Maybe we just leave it on top of the chair. So,
yeah, that works.
You may have heard of Brandon Sanderson, the world's most prolific fantasy writer, Writer's George, who writes 10,000 books a year, an outlier who should not be counted. And I've read like a third of 2 separate Brandon Sanderson books, and I really like them. I haven't been able to get back into them. It's entirely my attention span's fault. That's all. And as I understand it, he has a very large scale and very complicated, but also very comprehensive hard magic system where it's like there's a really big overarching magic system, and the way it manifests on individual worlds looks different, but is kind of the same thing. So it's like this one, it's Stormlight, and this one, it's that thing where they eat metal and use it as batteries. So it's very cool. The ones that I've read are like the first third of The Way of Kings, and the first third of that one with the eating metal thing. That might have been the same book. Look, it was like last year of college. I was extremely busy and sleep deprived.
Yeah, similar vein. I don't think I've read any Brandon Sanderson. I'm sure it's great. I just haven't gotten around to it. I've been slacking on my reading recently. I just started the Discworld books. I can't start more than one series at a time.
Buddy. So I think we've heard that it's real good, but neither of us have any idea. Oh, hey, we just hit 3K. Yep. Sweet.
Oh, thanks, guys.
Yeah. Oh, man, other fun fact, Brandon Sanderson once recommended Trope Talks on a podcast he was on, and I died on the spot. So
yes. Much love to Brandon Sanderson.
Yes.
Respect for his prolific writing timetable.
Yes.
We'll read it eventually. We can't talk about it on this stream because neither of us know anything.
Yeah, maybe we could just like put it up next to the S tier and just leave it there.
Throw it
just
up like, next there and be like, it's there.
It's over
presumably.
there. Presumably. Yep. Okay, let's see.
This next one is fun.
Oh, buddy. All right, let me just get the text box in here. Oh, boy.
Let me tell you about the ancient texts that truly define the beliefs of our world.
Yep, a little
talking,
number
of course,
called...
about the Chronicles of Narnia. Can I be honest with you, Red, right now?
Go ahead. I'd love to hear your
I've never read a Narnia book. I've only seen movies. I just wasn't a series that we never read them when I was a kid.
That's
never got
wild.
around to them.
I read all of them. I had like the box set, and not only that, I had the box set that my mom had rearranged into reading order because she didn't like the in-universe chronology that they established, where it's like, oh, you start with like the magician's nephew and then you go on to yada yada and the line of words. She was like, no, this is stupid, read it in this order instead, and like arranged it so it's like you start with the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, you maybe never read the Silver Chair. It just kept going. God, these books, they're, how to describe, similar to Lord of the Rings. They are a very soft magic system in that they create a world saturated with magic where stuff just happens. And that's kind of all there is to say about that, because in basically every book, the main characters are just regular human kids that get isekai'd from the real world into Narnia. And they never have magic powers. They just have, you know, stuff, swords occasionally, hunting horns, bows and arrows.
A lot of the like classic swords and sorcery vibes. The magic is more like epic and prophetic than it is like, here are the rules and what you can do with it, which is kind of what we were talking about with the Lord of the Rings earlier, where it's like the magic sort of just like does what the universe needs it to do for flavor more so than direct effect.
Yeah, and so much of it is like, I mean, you know, Jesus' persona. Like, we all know what these books are about.
Yeah.
It's pretty canonical. And, like, a lot of it's very cool. There's a lot of very neat stuff in this world. I love Voyage of the Dawn Treader. I love the whole, like, we're going to sail to the edge of the world. And then, I still feel sad about Reepicheep, but, you know, whatever. I would say that Narnia is a very fun setting, but the magic system is mostly, like, it's like a thin film of spice on the outside of a fairly standard fantasy setting. Like, what can the magic do? It's never defined, actually. Like, what can happen in a given situation is almost completely arbitrary, which means that the magic system sort of exists to the detriment of the plot, because it's sort of like stuff can just happen, but also stuff can't just happen. What I will say is that there is less active magic than there is, like, passively integrated world-building magic. So, like, there's a lot of weird locations where stuff has just happened, and Voyage of the Dawn Treader is fun because you find a lot of those, like the creepy cursed pool where everything in it turns to gold. That one gave me nightmares. But, like, you know, they also introduced this, like, Narnia multiverse. Like, the White Witch is from another world where she killed everybody with a magic word that killed everybody. And it's like, oh, that's a thing that can happen? Okay, cool. Oh, shit, $200 donation from Anonymous. Thanks very much.
Oh, thanks, guys.
Anyway, I think as far as magic systems go, this is mid-tier at best.
Yeah, I'd put it on par with or below the Lord of the Rings. I feel like it's doing very similar things, and I tend to like the Lord of the Rings variant of this kind of magic system more so than the Narnia one, although again, I didn't read the books, so I can't speak to if it's better handled there than in the movies.
There's parts of it that are quite interesting. I think that part of what kind of benefits the books over the movies is that you can get into the characters' heads more. So again, Voyage of the Dawn Treader, pretty much the only one that I've retained serious memories from, has bits from the perspective of, like, Eustace. Also, his intro line is just so raw in the books. It's like, this young man is named Eustace Scrub, and he almost deserved it. And it's like, oh! Anyway, but, like, when he's stuck as a dragon and then when he sort of turns back, it's like a whole process that's kind of like the Lindworm. He's, like, shedding his skin over and over again, and by the time he's done, he's like a person again, and he's like, oh my god, I'm so happy to be a person again. Anyway, that
my inclination is to put this in the D tier. I feel it to kind of...
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
The problem is, as later Narnia books explore more of, like, the overall lore, like the universe hopping stuff, it just makes less sense over time. So I'd say D tier is a fair one for this one.
Yeah. Again, no bearing on the quality of the series, just its magic system.
Yep. And on from something that we have at least tangential awareness of to one that we really don't have that much awareness of, but we kind of needed to add because it's a staple. Let me just get this text box going. So, The Wheel of Time. A book series that I haven't read. I did read a comic adaptation of the first book and was told by friends who have read the other books that's probably not the best way to experience it, as it is.
I feel like this might fall into the Brando Sando category of we're both aware that it exists and that it is held up as excellent, but I don't think either of us has really consumed any of the series.
I also don't know how well it's aged. It's one of those things where it's like, it's a magic system with a gender binary baked into it, and I don't know if it's possible for that to age well. I know that they're sort of playing with it in the show, and I've heard very good things about the show. I just haven't watched it. I have no time.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like I've heard it's solid. I've heard it's doing interesting things. I've also heard it's maybe kind of not super good, especially about the weird gender stuff, which I figure was kind of inevitable about a magic system that has an explicit gender binary baked in. Of all the things to put a gender binary in. Why magic?
I would maybe put this with the Brando Sando category of we know it exists. It's definitely a magic system worth talking about, but unfortunately, by the makeup of this particular stream, I don't know if we're qualified to rank it in comparison to other series.
Yeah, we can just kind of float it over the chair in the general zone. Oh yeah, and good point, Lunar History. Brando Sando literally wrote the later books of the Wheel of Time. Like, the original author passed away before he could finish the series, but he left notes, and they were like, let's get this young up-and-coming Brando Sando type to write him. And I guess it kind of, he couldn't kick the habit afterwards, so, anyway. All right, so we're putting it in the general vague zone of we know it exists, we know people like it, we don't know a goddamn thing about it beyond that.
It's important when you're doing academic discourse like this is to acknowledge what you don't know and what you were unable to discover in your research or simply have not had time to fully understand. And for us, it's unfortunately everything in that upper right-hand corner of the screen.
Yep. Alrighty. Now, looking at our notes, I see one thing that I don't know if we're doing and one thing that we're definitely going to do. Are we doing the one that you're selecting?
Let's go to this one that I've just started selecting now, 'cause I feel like
I realized we skipped a couple.
Some stuff.
So sorry, they weren't highlighted, but this one I think we're gonna get some popular takes.
So I just started reading this series, and I started with the first book in the series, which I'm told was not the correct way to do it, but it was the only one that my local bookstore had available, so that's where I started, and I like it so far, but I'm like 3 chapters in.
Yep. So the Discworld magic system. The world of Discworld is odd. It's very it's inconsistent, but purposefully so. It started off as a fairly shallow parody of fantasy tropes, and then as Terry Pratchett wrote more of it, he clearly got just like more invested in the stuff he was playing with. And after a while, things that were one-shot jokes got developed out into being just full concepts and cultures and very complex systems of world building. And he explored a lot of very interesting concepts. It's just really good. It's a really good setup that is very clearly not trying to create a consistent, ironclad system by which every story in it must follow. There is magic in the Discworld. There are witches and wizards, and they're different. There's also, there's one male wizard and I think a couple... maybe one female witch, one female wizard, male witch. You know what I mean? Whatever. This is why gendering magic is stupid. It always gets confusing.
Yeah.
But they sort of explore that in some of the books. The Tiffany Aching series and the Witches novels, more broadly, talk about that specific kind of magic. All the books set in Ankh-Morpork and a lot of the books set about death kind of talk about the Wizard Academy, those guys that do magic, and how...
It feels like it's a world that's steeped in magic, and I hope that you could talk more to what the system actually is, because the world itself just feels inherently magical in the same way that, some of these middling tier ones do.
No, absolutely. I'd say this world is magical in the same way that, Pripyat is radioactive, It's steeped in it to the potential detriment of its own structural stability. It's just the universe on its own is very intensely magical. There's gods all over the place. There's tides of magic. The whole world is incredibly magical. It's a flat disc on the back of 4 elephants on the back of a giant turtle swimming through space. It's magic as balls. And it's explicit that there's tides of magic in the universe, and the turtle sometimes swims nearer or farther from some and sometimes swims through weird stuff. And then there's just extra dimensional incursions of weird shit, because not only is this world magical, it's kind of in-universe sort of fictional, in that fictional systems of storytelling can incur into the universe and cause problems. One of the early Witches novels is called Witches Abroad, and the premise of the book is that one of the main characters' evil twin sisters is basically playing fairy godmother in a distant kingdom sort of based on New Orleans, and is orchestrating a happily ever after between two characters that really probably should have free will of their own and stuff like that. But this is just a world that is not only intensely magical, it's intensely trope-filled in a way that all of the characters are sort of aware of. And I've been told that this is something that The Last Unicorn kind of does. And when I say I've been told, I mean the Dominic Noble video on The Last Unicorn said that he does this, which I think is quite interesting. But basically it's a world where, like, sometimes, you know, people just know that there are, like, lost true kings that just turn up sometimes with magic swords and birthmarks and heroism and stuff like that. And, there used to be dragons, but they all went somewhere else, and where they went is a dimension that is just literally packed full of dragons. There's just so much weird shit, but it's like, it's almost to the point where it doesn't matter that it's internally inconsistent because it is so chaotic that, like, you sort of have to focus on whatever the paradigm is for this individual book.
Right.
So, like, one of the recurring characters is the anthropomorphic personification of Death himself in one of his earliest novels.
Of course.
Death takes on an apprentice, and the apprentice falls in love with Death's adoptive daughter. The apprentice and the adoptive daughter later have a daughter, Susan Stow-Hewitt, granddaughter of Death, who has many abilities that you would expect from someone who is perhaps biologically related to Death, but wouldn't necessarily expect from someone who cannot possibly be biologically related to Death. There's just a lot of weird shit like that. A lot of it gets even weirder. Thief of Time, I remember being kind of a trip to read. There's, like, a whole explicit thing that happens in universe where there's, like, this order of monks that are constantly working to fix the universe that keeps getting broken by all the weird shit happening in it. So what I'm saying is, this is a story where the magic system is pure chaos and the world is also pure chaos. And the fact that those two work together means that it never feels like the world is fighting against the magic system or the magic system is fighting against the world, except in ways that are explicitly acknowledged in story as things that are happening. And I just love it. I love it so much.
Just from what little I've experienced of this series, and also from the way you've just described it, I'm inclined to put this maybe in, like, the B tier. It feels like it's a good mesh, or higher, but
I'd put it higher. But that's just because I love it so much. It's like, I guess in terms of basic magic systems, I feel like maybe it would actually be disingenuous to put it super high because it does not have rules so much, or if it does, they exist to be broken or bent or you know, futzed with. Like, they'll introduce individual rule sets in individual books and then play with that. And that's fun. I think that's very cool. Yeah. But in terms of just, if you take it in isolation, if you separate it from the world, it wouldn't really work applied to anywhere else. I guess the problem is, like, for what it is, I'd say top tier, like absolute S tier. If you're trying to treat it like any other magic system, you know, maybe a B tier. But, like, gosh, I don't know. It's funny. Chat's having the exact same problem. Like, it's either an S tier or a B tier. I'm barely seeing any A's.
Yeah, I feel like it's, I mean, for what it is, it's an incredibly well executed story.
Woo,
I guess the question is the... Oh,
thank you, S.A. Vulcan.
Red, do you want to remind them who we're
Oh, yes, we're raising money for UNICEF. They do good work worldwide. They help out children around the world. Currently, the main thing they're fundraising for is to help out in Ukraine. So when I was setting this up, I didn't have the option to specifically pick what exact cause of theirs this is going towards, but everything they do is good work. So, yeah. So thanks so much for donating. And if we can hit that 5K limit, maybe we'll open up to chat and see if they have any suggestions for magic systems we can rank after we run out of our current list.
We're getting towards the end of our existing list, so if you want to hear some of your suggestions, potentially like lightning round ranked, maybe and you got the money to spare, donate.
I guess the problem is I love Discworld's magic system so much. It's exactly what it needs to be for the stories that Sir Terry wanted to tell, and that integrates it so well with the story. Like, most of the ones that we've sort of had to kick down the list are the ones where the story suffers because of the magic system not being fully integrated with it. Or like in Lord of the Rings, the magic system sort of almost disrupts the plot because it's like, this feels like it should be solvable with magic. And, you know, Narnia is almost like this done wrong, where it's like the whole place is intensely magical in a way that doesn't really make sense. And the fact that Discworld is so self-aware of its own tropes. Not just the story is self-aware, the characters are frequently self-aware, especially in the earlier books where he's sort of leaning more into the fantasy parody. Like the Guards novels, especially the early ones, are just absolutely hilarious because Vimes is just constantly aware of the tropes that he's stuck in and like the stuff he tries to avoid. I've talked about how one of my favorite characters in the entire Discworld is Carrot Iron Founderson, who is just fully the lost king of Ankh-Morpork, who comes back, and instead of taking the throne or using his ancestral sword and birthmark, he just becomes a policeman because he wants to serve and protect his people. And everyone in the city reflexively responds to him well because he's the true king, and that's just how things work. And everyone who's anyone in the city just knows this. Anyway.
I like everything I'm hearing about the story, but I do feel like this has got to stay B tier for me just because it sounds like the story is excellent, but the magic system itself isn't necessarily... I mean, no magic system has to be perfectly well defined, and its chaotic nature works really well with the chaotic nature of the story. Yeah. But as a system, I don't know if I can comfortably put it in the S tier.
That's fair.
Independent of its
you know
story.
what?
Again,
we can split the difference and put it in the A tier. I've got no complaints.
Sure.
Yay! Sure. Okay, let me just... Oh, no. Okay, there we go.
Again, this is no shade on the books.
No, of course.
So far, what I've read of... what's the first book called?
Color of Magic.
Hold on. Yep, Color of Magic. So far, what I've read of it, great. But,
yeah.
Magic systems are what we're here to talk about, and magic systems we will.
All right.
There's one last particularly important magic system I feel like we need to cover
before
we start getting into some of the
Seeing
nonsense.
as we actually kind of already brought this one up, we just pop this sucker in there. Now, unlike most of these, this one I actually reread quite recently.
Nice.
Not like... The first time I read it, I was pretty little, and I don't think I really understood it. And I read it recently, and I was like, oh yeah, I definitely wouldn't have gotten this as the right age. But, it's Earthsea. It's Ursula K. Le Guin's The Wizard of Earthsea series. Now, I've reread the first book of these. I haven't reread the later ones. I'm not actually sure I read all of the later ones at any point. I know they got pretty interesting. But we are discussing the magic system in Earthsea. And the magic system in Earthsea, as mentioned when we discussed the inheritance cycle, is true name magic. Le Guin kind of pioneered it. The idea is that everything in the world has a true name, and magic, it basically involves memorizing a huge, big tome of all the names of things, and then you can do magic on them. Knowing someone's true name gives you a ton of power over them, which is why it's very, very carefully kept. So almost all the main characters, or basically every character in the world, has a sort of like a familiar name they use, like a nickname, and then they have a secret true name. One of the main characters, actually the main character, why am I saying one of the main characters, reveals his true name to like his super best bud / hetero life partner, who also reveals his true name to him as like a big sign of like their mutual respect and love for each other. And it's like a big deal. He at one point uses true name magic to convince a very annoying dragon to just leave and stop harassing a fishing village. So true name magic makes you pretty ridiculously powerful, but there are also ironclad limitations that they place pretty clearly in the story. And they do this because the main character we're introduced to, he's kind of he's very talented. He's a very talented young guy, and that means that as soon as he goes to the Special Academy for Wizards, which, by the way, they have one of, and it's not as original a concept as some people might think. Some people who perhaps only read Harry Potter and never anything else. Anyway, once he goes there, he's showing off all over the place. He's a badass. He's talented. He's so smart. And then he accidentally unleashes a horrible darkness shadow monster that then stalks him for like a while.
As one does.
And kills people and like wears their bodies to get closer to him. It's pretty fun.
Student things.
Yeah, just hashtag college experiences. And he that sort of tempers him a little bit. He becomes much less rash and hot-headed after that. He gets some pretty rad face scars. He's still doing ridiculously badass wizardy stuff after that, of course. He's just a bit less of a dick about it. They also introduced just one easy ironclad rule, which is like if you turn into an animal and you stay that way for too long, you will forget how to be a person. And this actually briefly happens to the main character when he has to escape a bad situation. He turns into a bird, flies all the way back to his old master, and basically it's blind luck that this is one of like the only people in the world who knows his true name and can turn him back with it, because otherwise he'd just be stuck as a bird. So anyway, very solid magic system, very clear rules established, but they also kind of have this hint of like eldritch horror to the world. Like, there's an ironclad magic system, but if you poke holes in reality, really bad stuff can come out, and it doesn't always follow the rules as much as maybe it should. Like, it does. They all are also subject to true name magic, but other rules, you know, like natural laws of physics, they don't listen to so much.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I'd put this at probably B or above. I haven't Earthsea is not a series I've read. I've read other Le Guin works, but I just never got it. I'm really behind in my fantasy books, guys. I don't know if you can tell.
Yeah.
But it's such an iconic establishment of a very well-known system, and it's well executed. So
yeah,
I'm inclined to put it pretty high up.
I'd put this in A tier, I'd say, just because it establishes such a very simple rule set that, I mean, it's been ripped off by everybody else, basically. Everyone likes true name magic. It's such a simple ingredient to add to a magic system. The idea that naming a thing gives you power over it is a classic bit of fantasy literature, and it's like she kind of created the platonic ideal of it. Yeah. So I'd put this A tier, I'd say.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yep. And I believe that takes us to the last item we currently have on the list, which you put there, right? Are we doing the second to last or the last?
Let's go to the last. I think second to last might not actually be a magic system.
What? Wait, you got rid of the crazy one? Why would you do that?
We'll put it back on. Let's get through the not crazy one first.
Okay. All right.
So let's talk about The Legend of Zelda.
Yeah. This one, I feel like this one's kind of tricky because every game kind of has their own sort of, like, you know, it's a game franchise that spans several decades. Like, a lot of stuff happens in it. In some, like, the one defining feature of the Legend of Zelda lore is always the Triforce, the goddesses that made it, the goddess that made those goddesses. And that's basically it. Everything else is, who the fuck knows? It all changes. The dragons get shifted around, different gods, different powers, different magic. I feel like in terms of concreteness, this one's kind of low.
Yeah.
But for each individual game, within the boundaries of that game, the rules tend to be pretty consistent. So, like, you know, in Wind Waker, the whole thing is about waking the winds. And that's it. So all the stuff you can do that's weird in that game is about wind waking. And, like, in Twilight Princess, all the weird stuff, that's Twilight Realm nonsense, baby.
Yeah, I feel like it's a very internally consistent system, and that everything kind of works with the right vibe of the reoccurring, you know, Triforce reincarnations and everything. But it does have the caveat of it's a game series, so every game introduces kind of a new mechanic that the player gets to use, which just happens to usually be a branch of that magic system, and they execute it well.
Yeah, I'd say that's accurate. It's fairly solid, and it helps that the main characters tend to be fairly underpowered compared to some. So, like, Ganon is usually running around with some pretty nutso powers, but Link basically just has, like, a sword, whatever talking sidekick he has, and gumption. Yeah. And Zelda, it kind of depends. Like, Breath of the Wild, Zelda is sort of the most overpowered she ever gets, exactly. But, like, you know, in a lot of the games, she's just kind of, oh, we just hit 5K. Thank you, Anonymous, for them $70. All right, well, we'll get there. Don't worry. We'll start opening up the chat a little bit after we sort out this one and the last one. I don't know. This one I don't know about, because, like, the magic system is sort of twofold. We can look at the part of the magic system that's based on the in-game lore of the universe, and we can look at the magic system that's based on, like, the gameplay. So some games, you know, there's, like, the ones where you can shrink real small. That's magic. There's the ones where, you know, you can turn into a wolf. That's magic. Oh, yes, the train. I forgot about the one where your magic system is Ghost Train.
I mean, who doesn't want a ghost train? I put this somewhere in, like, the middle to lower middle area. I feel like it's, you know, a well-executed system in that it's very consistent as to what it's trying to achieve, but it's not necessarily a standout in terms of explaining, you know, how to use said magic other than the tutorial option in any given game.
Yeah, I'd say that, like, the games are quite fun. The world is quite exciting. All the stuff about the goddesses and the Triforce and the various ways they've used the Triforce, that's pretty fun. Parts of the backstory of individual games are very interesting. I think the whole thing with Wind Waker, where, like, Ganon is kind of right about, like, your gods destroyed you, is like, yeah, they did, bud. Globe-spanning floods are generally pretty devastating.
Yep.
But, like, is that magic system or is that just game lore? I feel like that's game lore.
Yeah, it's in a weird game lore kind of territory.
I'd put the
this in, like, the
C tier.
C tier.
Yeah, C tier I think is pretty easy. It's fun,
Yeah, that's fair.
but it's not as concrete as it would need to be, I'd say, to really, yeah. Are we putting it like high C or low C?
I do low C.
Low
I
C.
feel like it's good, but it depends on the game as to what kind of lore you're getting and what have you. Before we move on to this last one, I do need to go harass my cat for a second because I think she's trying to eat something that she's not supposed to.
Perfect.
So I'll be right back.
All right, I'll just keep chat company.
Yeah, do your best Indigo impression, since every time I leave, I always tell people to impersonate you.
Ha! Wait, what? All right, let me just see. Chat, how y'all doing? I guess Naruto has a magic system. I wish I was more familiar with it, but I'm not. Guys, I cannot talk about my own comic on this tier list. It would be very disingenuous. Come on, really? All right. Good points about Percy Jackson, though. We might be able to bring that up after we get the last bonkers edition on here. Oh, I can tell. Obviously, there's a bit of a delay between, what I say and when chat responds, so I can tell when Indigo left because the chat just sped up like crazy. Oh, no. This has been really fun. I always enjoy doing After Dark streams, but it's always a little stressful because I don't normally run the tech side of the streams, so when I do, I'm like, the stakes are so much higher. Let's see. The funny thing is, I'm seeing... Oh! Hello?
Indigo? I'm back. I have the cat.
Ah! She's returned!
Say hi. Say hi, Ziggs.
Her power is maximum.
She's sniffing the mic, but she's not saying anything.
It's what she deserves.
You were screaming earlier. Come on, baby.
She'll figure it out.
Well, it's appropriate that she's here because this is the last one on the list.
Yeah, let me just add the text box for your...
But this is, and I feel like I should be clear, pure pandering to me.
Yep. Yeah, it is.
We're going to talk about the magic system of Cats, the musical.
You're darn right we are. You're gosh darn tootin', that's what we're about to do with our lives.
So I feel like we need to establish what the magic of the show is, because obviously the magic of theater could count for so many things, but that's not what we're talking about here. Talking about cats, baby. Yes, Ziggy.
Yeah.
What you are.
Yeah, so my understanding of Cats is I've listened through the soundtrack, the original musical. It's pretty good. Like everyone else, I've sung Memory, like when it's 3 a.m. and I'm like making brownies in the dark, perfect time.
You've got to.
Yeah, of course. You just gotta, there's a song in your heart, and you just gotta let it out. And I did watch the movie. It was nearly the last movie I saw before we went into lockdown.
It was the last movie I saw before we went into lockdown.
I saw it
and that was by my own choice.
Yes, I saw it on about 3 hours of sleep with a couple close friends, one of whom was drunk. And it was a wild experience. Not a good experience, but a wild experience. I also highly recommend the Sideways video about it, because it's what convinced me that the original Cats musical is maybe kind of good, actually, or at least has artistic merit.
It's got value. I feel like we got to talk... Do we want to talk about the movie or just the musical broadly? Because it is kind of two different things.
Well, you know what? I feel like, I'll leave that one up to your expertise as our resident theater person.
All right, we'll talk about... Let's talk about... God, it's so hard to choose because I love the movie so much.
Yeah, you do. You sure do for some reason.
We'll talk about the movie because I want to, and I'm making the rules right now. And I know we've both seen it.
Yes.
So there's not very much magic in Cats, other than, of course, the magic of theater, except for Macavity and Mr. Mistopheles, and I guess it's kind of implied old Deuteronomy, although all we ever see her do is activate a hot air balloon, so who knows.
Well, there's the inherent magic of the Jellicle choice, and how one cat will be reborn to a different Jellicle life. That's magic.
Yes. But essentially, where the magic comes from seems to be like a cat being the core essence of themselves, because Mr. Mistopheles has to be gassed up before he can do his magic, and Macavity loses his magic when he, is defeated at the Jellicle Ball.
Is that what happened?
That's how I interpreted it.
Okay, that's fair, I guess.
So I guess if we're gonna codify this magic system, we would have to say it's like the internal id made manifest, it's the ego expressed.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah, so I don't think it's a very good magic system. I feel like I
Really?
should be very clear about that. I
Shocking.
love it. It's ambiguously powerful, has very little effect on the plot except for one song that is in the movie important and in the play kind of just like a guy gassing himself up. So I would say that this is probably an E or F tier magic system. I would put it in E just on my sheer love of cat casting spell, but I understand if it needs to be lower than that.
Well, it's funny because I feel like the problem with cats is the more you think about it, the less it makes sense because it's not designed to be thought about. It was a goofy little book of poems by T.S. Eliot. That was all. The point of the Cats musical, as I understand it, was the experience, the lycra, the hair. And then, the movie was just kind of like, but what if none of that? And also, what if we lost all the point of the pacing of the music? So again, everybody watch the Sideways video about it. He explains better than I can why it's bad and stupid.
But we're not putting it high on the list, is I think the takeaway.
No, we're not. We're not putting it higher than anything on this list I actually like.
So what, F tier?
F tier, yeah. I'd put it in low E tier if we absolutely must, but I've not heard a single merit this magic system has.
I understand. I put it on the list, not really thinking it through, and then about a third of the way through the stream, I was like, I don't actually know if there is a magic system for cats.
Yeah.
But I like it, so we talked about it anyway.
Okay. All right, I think magic-wise, it's never explained. It doesn't make any sense. These are cats, for crying out loud. Why can they do actual magic? Bam.
One of them has broken every human law.
God,
they can do anything they want.
Every human law. Tax evasion.
Jaywalking,
murder. Alrighty. We have exhausted our pre-made list. We have also reached our $5,000 goal of money raised for UNICEF. Very nicely done. Applause all around. Now, I've seen two things popping up in chat, one of which I've watched. The other one I haven't. We're going to do the one I haven't watched first out of spite to make you stop. Okay, here we go.
Which one is it?
You'll see in a second. Don't worry.
Oh boy, I'm watching
I
the
think
stream,
I think you'll know what it is.
I have a guess, but if it's the one I'm guessing, I've actually watched quite a bit.
I've watched like 2 episodes of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
Oh, I've seen none of that. Okay.
Yeah.
Never mind, it's not the one I'm thinking of.
I watched like the first episode, and I love the bit where JoJo and Dio are yelling at each other while falling through a burning building that's 4 stories at most, and the yelling goes on for about a minute and a half. I know it has a magic system. I know the gist of it. I know it stands. I know they're all named after like musical creators for some ungodly reason. I know it's something like your id turns into a superpower and punches people. Whatever. I think it's I don't know, by reputation, I know that it doesn't make all that much sense. But like it's sort of its sheer levels of batshit insanity kind of endear it to people anyway, I guess. But yeah, if nothing else, out of spite at the spamming, I'm inclined to put this quite low unless I'm persuaded otherwise.
I have one friend who really likes JoJo's. I've only watched an episode or two kind of randomly, so I can't really speak to it too well. I kind of know it only on vibes and what anime TikTok has spat out at me periodically through trends. I don't know how much I would consider it a magic system because I don't know in the show how these stands are explained. My understanding is if you pose, you can use your stand or something like that, and that's why you gotta, JoJo pose.
Wait, again, really? Is the pose important?
I assume. Otherwise, why would they be standing like that all the time?
Well, my running theory is that the creator of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is an alien that's in too deep pretending to be human and is like his only way to glean how well he's passing is by the reaction to his manga. So he's like, I named them after musical numbers and people seem to like that. And the fashion hasn't raised any red flags yet.
And then a C or B. Man, people are all over the place and where they want to see JoJo's put. I don't know enough about it to put it high, but I also don't know enough about it to put it like in the last 2 tiers. So it's probably D to B is the range.
D is fine by me. I think we can squoze it in D. I think we don't know enough about it to feel justified in putting it in C. I'll put it next to all mana systems and
not important.
And Narnia.
Guys, I don't know. I just know there was the TikTok trend where you had to JoJo pose or whatever.
Oh, that's
Is
the
this
least
what the
surprising
kids
news
are
I've ever
into?
heard. Alrighty.
I saw a couple people asking for One Piece, which is a series I've seen a bunch of.
Oh, okay.
Red, I don't know if you've watched any.
I have not. I watched Nun Piece for a while, but then they kind of stopped making that.
I quite like One Piece, which I know is a big ask to get people into now.
Yeah, hot take. Everybody should watch the longest anime in the world.
It's unfortunately very good. So but it has kind of like two magic systems that just sort of work in parallel. There's and I hesitate to call them magic systems because one definitely kind of is, and the other is sort of just like magical choosy artifacts that you can eat. So
well, I know about the devil fruit thingy. What's the other one?
You eat one haki, which is sort of like you just force your will out and can make people quake with fear or whatever. There's a lot of different variants of it. That was added post time skip. So
of course it was.
The devil fruit is like you eat it, you get the power of one of these 3 different kinds of fruit, and you can one's like you turn into an animal and you have different forms you can take. One's like you're an element and now you're made of fire or whatever. And then the third one is like you can do other stuff.
Like being stretchy.
And that's where that's the drop category for everything else. And then haki is like your force of will or something within you that essentially you can exert on the world. So
that's just shown in anime power.
Shown in anime power, basically. You can, I think, set yourself on fire, and you can make crowds of lesser goons just quake with fear and then just knock them all out of the fight. You know, that kind of stuff.
Yes, your sheer protagonistic gumption gets them out of the way.
Yeah, and I really like the series. I think it's fun and incredibly consistent for something that has run so long. But I don't think that the magic system is the strength of it. I think the devil fruit stuff is really fun. I don't know if I would call that a magic system necessarily. I think that's sort of just like a thing that also, like a system that also exists in the world, but it's not like spell casting. And I guess you could describe it as magical, but it's not really described as such in the text. Haki's a little closer to that, but that still falls into the trap of like monks in D&D, where it's like, okay, was this internal force to you that you're exerting in the world outside, your ki essentially, like, is that magic or is that trained? So I don't know how high, I don't think I would rank this particularly high in terms of magic system. It is consistent, although it does evolve somewhat frequently due to having been running for like 20 years.
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like did they ever explain where devil fruit comes from?
I think it is explained. I am not up to date enough to be able to give you.
Yeah,
it's kind of like reference a bunch. It's like, ooh, it's a fragment of creation or something like that. I would put it maybe in like D or C.
That's fair, I guess. This kind of feels like one of those things where the magic system kind of exists to like explain having a wacky large cast of characters with weird powers. I'd pretty much equate that to fairy tale, except I guess in One Piece it causes fewer plot problems. So
I think it is more explicitly explained in One Piece than it is in Fairy Tail, although I would also argue that in One Piece it is less of a magic system than Fairy Tail, so it's sort of towing that line. I would maybe put it in the D tier.
D tier?
Just because I do think it has
that's fair.
A bit more, like, it does adhere to the rules that it sets. It does set rules, and it's like, these are the way that these things work. It just also makes up new things to have rules about 10 years in. You know?
Right, of course. Now, I will say I saw chat bringing up Arcane quite a bit.
Oh.
Gonna pop that one in
Another
there.
gray area magic system, because
No, there's magic in Arcane. It's just we see very little of it. Now, for those of you who have not seen Arcane, you should. It's very, very good. Basically, most of the magic we see in Arcane is Magitech. They call it a Hex Tech. That's the official in-universe name for it. The general term across tropes is Magitech. Magic Tech, anyway. But yeah, in Arcane, it's Hex Tech, which is basically an attempt to use technology and crystals. Obviously, it's always crystals, and it's always glowing blue crystals. To
the
power
blue of all magical effects.
Of course, yes, except for the evil stuff, which is purple. And we see proper magic used, I believe, once in a flashback to the youth of Jace. That's his name. Yeah.
Tragic backstory.
When he's a kid and like they're stuck in the snow, and this just random wizard guy shows up and uses like his staff and a bunch of runes and just isekais them into another world where it's warmer, which is cool. So I'd say that the magic system isn't clearly explained, but feels fairly solid, except it's not explained. So, like, it gives the impression that it's fairly not strictly limited, but what it can do is I don't know, tonally consistent. So like they use it to create portals to like not is it other worlds? I don't think they make this clear.
No, I think it's just other locations on the continent.
Yeah.
I am not up to date on my League of Legends lore, which is where they're drawing this from.
Right, yeah.
And in the show, I think it's sort of just implied to be other countries, essentially.
Right, but I know that
but
in
are
League of
very
Legends
far away and maybe over.
Right, but League overall has a lot of just like almost all the characters are from different worlds. It's rarer to find two characters that are from the same world. So you basically end up with this setting that has an implied multiverse and has an implied ability to traverse the multiverse that just hasn't been unlocked yet, because none of the characters using magic are just full-blown like mages or whatever. They're researchers that are trying to approach this from a scientific standpoint. So the implication is that there is a full-blown magic system out there, but they have to approach it from this perspective, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting lens to look at the magic system through. It does mean it's a little bit difficult for us to rate the magic system itself, because obviously, as we're following the point of view of the characters in the show, and Red, as far as I'm aware, neither of us has ever played League of Legends.
Wait, hold on. I'm being well-actualied in chat.
Oh?
It's fucking stupid that they're all supposed to be from the same world, guys. Literally, Sun Wukong is one of the playable characters. If League is telling you they're all from the same world, League is lying to you and themselves.
Irregardless of what the League of Legends canon is, in Arcane, the worlds are all, the same. But also the magic system is something that the show is actively exploring through the characters. And so we kind of learn about the system as they do. So it's a really interesting application of the system, I think, in that it's not necessarily focused on characters using the effects outside of the kind of like time skip we get where they harness this hex tech, but it's more about the burgeoning understanding of the system.
Hold on. Chat, are you telling me that what is actually going on is that League had a multiverse and then they retconned it? And they got rid of the multiverse? God, that's stupid. You're all not allowed to give me shit for that. That's on League. That's not my fault. I played it for one very bad week in college.
The tagline of everyone who liked Arcane and doesn't want to learn things about League of Legends against them.
God, the saddest thing I ever saw on the internet was all the people being like, I want to watch Arcane. Do I need to play League of Legends? And it's like, God, no. Nobody on Earth should play League of Legends. It's not fun. Even if it were fun, the community makes it unfun.
Yeah, it's a man. Watch Arcane. Don't bother with League of Legends.
God.
But the magic system.
The magic system's all right. It's fine. I like the Magitech. I like how limited it is, because they kind of try and make this very grimy, like dystopic, environment for Piltover. They obviously can't have magic solving all their problems, so mostly just makes people better at punching. Yeah. I'd say
I'd put this baby at like a C tier. I feel like it's good, but I don't know enough about the system itself to rate it much higher than that. I like how they've applied it so far, but like a main thrust of the story is exploring what the system can do and how it works. So unfortunately, until the story continues, I don't feel super confident talking about how the system works. Yeah. I don't know, and the characters don't know.
Yeah, but I'm also inclined to pump this down a little out of spite, because God, the minute we bring it up, chat becomes about 10 times more insufferable. Really, guys? What is it about League of Legends that makes people so obnoxious about it?
Oh, boy.
Well, actually, they're all from the same dimension. That makes sense for the wildly disparate character designs and the fact that some of them are just from real mythology.
You go ahead and put Arcane where you want to put it, and I'll start talking about another game series that I keep seeing pop up in the chat.
Will be nice.
A lot of people have requested the Elder Scrolls and/or Skyrim, which is a series I have played.
Baby.
So I actually can talk about.
That's a rabbit hole and a half, especially if you check the wiki.
So, from what I remember of the last time I played an Elder Scrolls game, the magic system kind of works in a few different ways. There's like a lot of different types of magic. If you think about how like the mage class of character works, there's different schools of magic. So, you have necromancy and conjuration, what have you. But then there's also like the Dragonborn magic, which is tied to being the child of a dragon, and we're sort of getting into fairy tale territory here, where it's like, well, there's all these different ways you can be magical, and you sort of just are, because if the player character had barriers to using magic other than leveling up, it would kind of be less fun. Something that's really interesting that they do is the words of power, the Thum, the shouts that the game Skyrim in particular is really famous for, where if you learn different words in the dragon language, you can say the word and then stuff happens. Hey, wait a minute, that's what the doing. I don't know. I don't think that the Elder Scrolls universe's magic is particularly unique, but I mean it's fun to play around with in the context of the games. There's a lot of different variants of it. It's got the kind of like elves are usually better at magic, but anyone can do it kind of tone to it.
Yeah,
There's
classic.
different schools of magic. If you want to go for the mage route, as you level up and your player character gets more powerful, you can cast more powerful spells. You have a mana pool because it's a video game and you can't just cast spells endlessly. When you're Dragonborn, you can like absorb dragon souls to be able to use more words. So it's kind of I don't know if it's a particularly standout system. I love the games, but
what I like
don't know if it
about the Skyrim magic system is, or I guess the Skyrim world building more broadly, is the hoops it has to jump through to make every ending for every game canon. Because that's what they decided to do. They were like, that's a reasonable expectation to set for ourselves, which is just, I mean, wow. Talk about Icarus flying too close to the sun. Because that means that, like, if you check the wiki, and this is stuff that's, like, I guess theoretically in game lore, but you have to really dig for it and, like, put the pieces together. Like, it's canonical in the timeline of Skyrim that, like, every ending for the games with multiple endings are true, and then, like, after the game, like, the waveform collapses, and everything that has happened all becomes true at the same time, and it's called, like, a dragon break or something like that. There's a specific star that always shines in the sky when the multiverse is splitting like that. It's possible that the Dwemer accidentally, like, poofed themselves out of existence by futzing around with, like, Daedric artifacts. It's just so wild. I genuinely really love the tone set by Skyrim's magic and world building.
100%.
Because it's so,
it's such a fun vibe.
Right, and not just that, it's got a nice twinge of eldritch horror, which I really appreciate in every magic system. Just really kind of play up that whole, we're tampering with that which man was not meant to know, and sometimes you fuck up and accidentally unmake your entire civilization. It's just Tuesday, you know? It's how it works.
I think the world building's not in question.
I don't want to put this too high because I feel like magic-wise, like, it's, you know, not really explained most of the time. And there's like 8 different things happening because you got, you can just
drawing from a lot of very familiar sources. Like, I don't know if it doesn't, other than maybe some of the dragon stuff, I don't know if anything it does is particularly unique to the series. Like, it's certainly flavored to be so that it fits in with the world, but I don't know how much it is its own distinct system compared to like because it's got elements of Earthsea's True Name system with the dragon shouts, and it's got elements of D&D's class system with the different schools of magic. So like it's drawing from a lot of sources that exist and probably do what it's doing better than it in terms of magic. But it's very good at, you know, flavoring the world and flavoring those systems so that fit within its world. So I don't know, I put it somewhere like higher middle, but not A or S, I think.
Yeah, I guess we could put it like on the line between B and C, and that it's like, it's fun and it's got enough weird stuff to elevate it, but it's not so well put together as to like really, really transcend.
Yeah, I would hesitate to put it above any of the systems that it's based off of. So
Sounds
I think
good.
on that line between B and C sounds good.
Okay, now let's see what chat has. Lots of requests
chat.
for Fate. Do you have any experience with the Fate franchise?
That's like the Gilgamesh, but he's an anime girl thing, right?
I believe Gilgamesh might be an anime dude, but yes.
Oh yeah. So no, I know nothing about Fate.
Yeah, I believe I once tried to watch one of the anime and I gave up immediately because it was boring. That's my hot take for the day. Let's get more salt in chat. I'm feeling nostalgic now that the League of Legends people have left.
If you like,
Percy Jackson. Just so many people requesting Percy Jackson. It would be disingenuous not to bring that one up.
I saw a bot pop up. I got a fastest ban in the West, baby.
Yeah, get him.
Whipping it out. Percy Jackson, yeah, that's
Percy
fun.
Jackson, yeah.
I know that one.
Yeah, now the magic system in Percy Jackson is pretty simple as long as you stick with the Percy Jackson books and then don't get into the branched out ones with the other gods, because then it just kind of gets confusing.
Yeah.
But if we just stick with Percy Jackson, very simple magic system. Every demigod has a special ability, basically, as a result of their divine heritage. Monsters exist and are obscured by the mist, so regular humans can't see any of the weird shit happening. Yeah, pretty solid. It produces a very simple, nice, fun little system that lets you compartmentalize yourself according to like which single personality trait you want to define yourself with, which is how all of these things work eventually.
Yeah, if you were this, because this we're here already. If you had to be the demigod child of one of the gods, and specifically at Camp Half-Blood, which one would you want to be the child
Yeah,
of?
everybody
Red?
loves those quizzes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're here. What is an After Dark for, if not getting wildly on a tangent, vaguely based on the topic we're talking
Oh,
about?
absolutely. Yeah, no, the Percy Jackson series is really good for sort of stirring the imagination, and it's funny because of course the whole series kind of opens with like, trust me, you don't want to be a half-blood. It's scary. It's not fun. It's bad. I'm 12. It's uncool, and then everyone reading is like, God, I wish that were me. I could kill my bad
It's
teachers with
the
an
YA
actual
fantasy
sword.
effect. You're like,
Yeah,
I
exactly.
want to do this terrible, life-changing, haunting journey.
Nobody in like history has ever listened to "Don't try this at home."
Yeah.
Yeah, the Percy Jackson series has just a very solid baseline of like a lot of these, the magic system essentially exists to justify superhero origins. You know, it's like, all right, what specific flavor of power set do you want to get from your divine heritage or hanging out with Artemis? 50-50. Yeah, and it has that sort of appeal of like people love categorizing themselves, people love defining themselves by fictional things. Just mwah, always fun.
I would say this is probably sitting, like, I think this is like a kind of a simple meal well made situation where the magic system's not doing anything necessarily revolutionary, but it's being explained and utilized in pretty much
doing
a
anything
very
wrong.
fine.
Yeah,
It's not doing anything wrong. It's not doing anything outstanding. I would probably put this in like B tier.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, fill out
Yeah.
that nice little blank
Also,
space.
Red, you never answered the question. Who do you want your godly parent to be?
Oh yeah. Because I love defining myself by single personality traits.
Of course.
I mean, you know, part of the problem is like my urge to metagame means it has to be one of the big three who have the most interesting and fun powers.
I want to be Hermes because I'm really slow in real life, and I would love to be able to run really fast.
Yeah, that's fair. The problem is none of the answers are really good.
No,
but I did always like I liked the idea of Athena. I don't know.
It's fun.
I was that kind of kid who related a little too much to all of Annabeth's smart girl angst, and so yeah, you know. Boy. Oh, Grishaverse.
Yeah.
A few people have brought that up. I've only seen Shadow and Bone on Netflix. I haven't read the books.
I have never seen the show or read any of the books, so I cannot speak on this one.
We can pop it in just a little bit.
Yeah.
I remember that the magic system for this is fairly well compartmentalized, kind of the same way we've been talking about. Like, everyone who's got a magic ability has like one magic ability. And the main character is the super special chosen one who has the magic ability of the actual full-blown sun, while everyone else is like, oh, they can do fire, oh, they can do cosmetic surgery, oh, they can do like, I don't know, I'm sure there's others. I think that, again, very solid, very simple, very compartmentalized. There's a little weirdness because there are these like magical animals that you can like kill and then consume and gain their power, which is something. I think they were explained as having been created by a powerful mage at some point, but
of course.
Yeah, I don't know.
I love the idea of like, and this is probably not actually true to the show, but if just like a magic system where a mage like has like a bunch of guinea pigs or something, and like they do all sorts of crazy experiments on them, and then they escape and they just like become an invasive species and take over, and then there's just this new magical guinea pig population running around in the universe. I just think it'd be fun. Give guinea pigs magic powers.
Yes. Also, just a bit of housekeeping. We should probably wrap up in the next about 10 minutes so that the stream doesn't go too long. We're creeping up on 3 hours, and also that way chat might slow down a little bit. And stop just
one
listing
requested
media.
a few times, Red, that I think would be a really good closer. But let's finish this one up.
Yeah, let's figure out where to put Grishaverse.
To
I'd say Grishaverse is again kind of simple, meal well made. I'd put this maybe B tier. It does the compartmentalization well. Doesn't really open itself up for too much ridiculous OP bullshit, except it does have a slight weakness that like the ability for a character to use the magic seems to be kind of maybe a little bit arbitrary depending on the circumstances and the needs of the plot, rather than like training, which is kind of the same issue we had that knocked Avatar down a little bit. Because like the main character, she's trying to do her sun magic, and then it's just like, oh, she doesn't have confidence or something, but then she does, so it's fine. And again, that might have just been a problem with the adaptation, or a difficulty with translating a written medium where we can just be fully in this character's head to a visual medium where we can't be in her head at all, making it harder to really explain what's going on. But for my limited exposure, I'm inclined to put this in B tier and not futz with it too much.
Yeah, that feels fair.
Yep.
I don't really have a lot of exposure to it, so everything you said makes sense with the logic we've been working on so far.
Yep. Alrighty, and what's our last pick of the evening?
So I did see a few people request Comic Aurora.
God damn it!
I don't know if you want to talk about your own magic system run, but you do write one, and I feel like we could touch on it.
You were off dealing with Ziggy when I was like, guys, it would be silly of me to do my own comic.
Ooh, but it's so good, and you've got this whole web page that's called Magic, and then it lays out all of the basics of the system.
God, I do, don't I? That sure is a thing I wrote. Well, I can't possibly put this on the tier list. There's nowhere I could put it where this would work. But I mean, the magic system I built for Aurora was I was trying to keep it fairly concrete and fairly simple. As mentioned, I love compartmentalizing this stuff. I love subdividing, and I think it's interesting to produce these specific limitations on what magic can do. So I created a 6-element system because I thought 4 was boring and 5 was maybe kind of cool, but also kind of overdone because I'd been reading a lot of Witch at the time. And then I was like, if I squint, I can make lightning its own element. And then I did, and that was it. For those of you who haven't read it, which is fine, you don't need to. It's it's not everyone's thing.
You should though. It's very good.
Damn it. The gist is that each of the 6 elements of the world used to be a massive primordial living being, who died in this great battle with an evil dragon, and they've fused their bodies together to form a prison around the dragon, and now the remnants of their bodies forms the elements of the world that the characters live on. And the process of doing elemental magic involves essentially redirecting portions of the souls of those beings into portions of their body to animate them and make them do what the mage wants them to do, which is pretty icky. I like the idea that it's a pretty fun standard elemental bending system, but it's also planetary necromancy. I like the idea of something that's just eldritch horror if you think about it slightly differently.
A tinge of darkness to the otherwise candy-coated world.
Just a skosh.
You need a little bit of drama.
Yeah, but we've also mentioned that some of these magic systems are sort of just excuses to have superheroes, and that's kind of what this story ended up being, which is funny because I didn't realize that for years and years until I was trying to explain it to a friend of mine, and he kind of just wasn't getting it. He was like, if it's a fantasy world, are there any prophecies? What's drawing these characters together? And I was like, the power of friendship? I don't know. And then after kind of a half an hour of back and forth, he was like, oh wait, it's a superhero story. And I was like, oh fuck, it is. So that's how good I am at this.
It's got crossover appeal.
Yeah. Well, I really like superhero stories. I like it when you have a fairly standard but admittedly excited and colorful world, and then also just some people that are just weird but use their weirdness for good. I just think that's cool. And also, you can have some weirdos.
We'll have to do a tier list that's ranking all the Justice League members or ranking all the Avengers at some point to get to dive into some of that superhero nonsense.
That'll be fun. That won't be hot take central at all.
I feel like we agree on a select few, and then there's some that we are absolutely not aligned on.
Probably, yeah. I feel like once we get past the Nightwing and the Nightcrawler zone where it's just all the same character, different font. Once we get out of there, it'll be well, in this version, this character was a total jerk. Well, in this version, he was actually a great father figure. So, God, I'm already pissing myself off with my own opinions.
Save it for the next After Dark.
Later, baby.
I won't make you sort your comic onto a tier list, but I did want to talk
under the
about
chair.
it a little bit because it is a magic system. Put it with Cleo.
Yes, there it is. Cleo's napping on it. That's the dealio.
Yes.
The highest position of honor.
Yes.
Good stuff.
But it's good to talk about it because it's a very cool system, and it's fun to see how people who think about the stuff all the time end up applying it in their own work.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, a lot of almost every show that I've gushed about here was something I watched while I was working on Aurora. So you can see it. When I watched Fairy Tail and they had the crazy magic circles exploding out of them, I was like, I gotta put that in here. And then, Slayers, I was a little bit later on the game too, but watching that, I was like, oh baby, the potential, the possibilities. So, Full Metal Alchemist, a lot of formative years in there, as I am still just as much of a fan of it as I was the first time I watched it. Obviously Avatar, just, everyone who creates, the creative process, you can't do it on an empty tank. Everyone I know who creates also consumes just a ton of media, and usually when they're kind of burned out, they go and binge watch a show and then they're back in fighting form.
Mm-hmm.
And, obviously it's good to create your own work. I say stealing is wrong in general, but, creating usually means drawing on the things that you love and the things that really worked for you. So you can often tell, like, what someone, especially if they're an artist and maybe kind of a young one, you can usually tell.
You start drawing fan art for?
Exactly, yeah.
What was your first, like, fandom that you drew fan art for?
Oh, God. Fucking Saturday newspaper comics. I wasn't drawing fan art for it. I was just trying to artificially develop my own style, and I had, like, Calvin and Hobbes and, like, Rose's Rose and all that stuff, and I was just like, that makes sense.
Incredible.
And as I was drawing it, I was like, this isn't working. And then I remember I found my mom's old Shonen Jump collection and just, like, devoured the entire box. And the first bit of anime fan art I remember ever drawing to was from a short-lived manga called Steam Detectives.
Incredible.
Which was great. It was about a boy detective in, like, pseudo 1800s Steam City. It's definitely not London. It's Steam City. And
Steam City, baby.
And he was a boy detective, and he had a nurse sidekick, and she had a robot butler sidekick who contained the brain and possibly soul of her dead father. And he had, like, an evil enemy who was, like, a phantom thief who also had a sexy nurse sidekick, and she was the other sexy nurse sidekick's evil sister. It was the dumbest shit I've ever read. I loved it. And, like, something about the art style, it was very kind of like early Yu-Gi-Oh! Everything is spiky. Everyone's eyes are like rectangles.
I completely understand that impulse because the first series I ever drew fan art for was Stormhawks.
Oh my god! Yeah, we brought it back around, baby!
It always comes back to Stormhawks.
Of course it does. God. But yeah, I just remember, like, I saw this art style I had no way of comprehending, and I was just so, like, mesmerized by it, I tried to recreate it. And of course, like, it takes a lot of work to make ridiculous spiky polygonal eyes look good, so, like, it didn't look good when I started out, but that just kind of set me on the road. So yeah, my art style's got a lot of things in it, but big healthy dose of anime in there, obviously. God.
Yeah, but it's it's always fun to hear about from creators and hearing what they're inspired by and how it's changed the system. And also, we spent the last couple hours talking about magic systems, so it feels only right. Yes, chat. Stormhawks.
The Stormhawks has a magic system. It's got, like, crystals and shit. Like,
yeah, I do not remember enough about these magic system of Stormhawks to rank it.
Well, I think
I just remember it was all vibes, Red. It was skateboards in the sky, and I was here for it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we all know that those, like, crystals only existed to explain why they could have flying skateboards and, like, a sick-ass flying machine ship thingy. I think they kind of tapped into it, like, later. I remember there was a plot about, what's her name? You know, the girl? The one girl?
Oh, yes.
Her, yeah. She, like, started using...
I don't know any of their names except for Finn.
Yeah, that's fair. I can't remember any of them. Wait, no! There was the guy named Stork who has an inexplicably bafflingly huge following. And just a shit ton of fangirls.
I think about that show like once a month or so and like absolutely lose my mind.
Yeah, the last time I dealt you psychic damage, it was pointing out that your D&D character is just Stork from Stormhawks again.
I mean, 100%. That's, I mean, not intentionally, but even to this, like, to kind of bring it back around to artists taking influence from things they've consumed. Every once in a while, Stormhawks reels its head in my life again. I don't publish a comic, but I draw one for funsies just to, like, do some doodling on the side. And the aesthetic of it is largely based on some weird combination of Stormhawks and, like, traditional high fantasy, and I think it's fun, but, like,
her name is Piper.
Only appealing.
It's Piper. And
Piper,
I remember there was some kind of plot where, like, she was figuring out a way to use crystals for, like, proper magic, but, like, it was bad for her or something. I don't remember. I feel like I finished the show once, and then I started rewatching the show about 4 times. So, like, the first half of the first season, which might have been the only season, like, I got down, and then everything after that, who the fuck knows?
Yeah, but we've gotten a little bit off topic here. I think we're looking to wrap up the stream.
Probably. I'd say that's accurate.
Not that I don't want to talk about Stormhawks for several hours, but I feel like that's a whole other story.
OSP After Dark, just Stormhawks.
Oops, all Stormhawks.
Yeah.
We just watch an episode of Stormhawks.
Oh,
I don't think we get copyrighted for it.
You know what?
Who's monitoring the Stormhawks copyright?
Honestly, fair point. We could... No, that's a terrible idea. That's a time bomb waiting to happen. Yeah, anyway. Oh, baby. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in and for getting us friggin' $600 past our goal for the evening. Very impressive, everybody.
Incredible.
Yeah, no, fantastic work, everyone. I hope this was fun. Looking forward to the strongly worded comments we'll be getting from everybody in the world who we've managed to upset with this ranking, I'm sure.
Yep.
Yeah, we've got like a bunch of other After Dark topics to get through at some point, possibly some reading streams. But yeah, so the VOD of this should be up pretty quickly. So if you're just joining us now, don't worry, you'll be able to rewatch this whole thing later. It's going to be very exciting. Yeah, I guess thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next time we do one of these things.
I'm off to go watch more Stormhawks.
Hell yeah, you are. All right.
Oh boy.